Events began to take place on the mysterious fishing island of Takashima. Not far from the island, there was a fishing boat, with the help of which the travelers tried to catch fish. Suddenly, someone nearby pulled out a net to catch fish, but unfortunately, there was only seaweed in it. The worried young man realized that if these algae did not disappear, the mollusk would die. Meanwhile, someone nearby ordered the young man to hurry. It turned out that he was a very angry man who said that his charges should be more careful when dismantling the boat. Coming closer, the good-natured guy decided to ask his uncle what he was doing. The unkind man immediately removed the guy's hand from his shoulder and said that he was not doing anything. Turning his head towards the boy, the uncle began to say that the main character's family owed him $4,000, and now they would simply remove the engine from the boat to pay off this debt. Watching everything that was happening, the guy was simply in shock because he did not understand what to do in this situation, since he really was a debtor. The young man, very angry, shouted at the top of his lungs, calling on the villains to stop. Even the uncle was shocked by this turn of events, because he thought that the guy would simply not bother them. The determined fisherman shouted that when he grew in abalone and earned money, he would definitely return, and now everything depended only on their family. And if his uncle dared to touch this engine, the young man would have no choice but to simply break it. Realizing that it would not be possible to sell the broken engine, the uncle ordered his workers to leave immediately. The worried men realized that the guy simply would not be able to pay off this debt, since he was a beggar. Without losing hope, the protagonist still wanted to do everything possible to get rid of the debt to his uncle and finally live a normal life. After some time, events continued on the seabed. Since the main character was a professional diver, he could easily swim long distances and was looking for that very abalone. The guy still managed to find some sea creatures that he could take to sell them and pay off the debt. After looking around, the traveler noticed something very strange and decided to swim closer to this object. As soon as he was able to swim closer, he immediately saw some strange book lying on the bottom of the sea. When you touched this book, everything around you immediately began to glow with a bright light, and it seemed that the unusual object was magical. After touching the unusual object, the main character's body immediately began to change, as if it had acquired magical properties. A bright light emanated from the young man's forehead, and his body changed with every second. Feeling the changes in his body, the boy immediately began to think that perhaps the magic of healing diseases really does exist. Continuing to read this book, the hero realized that the knowledge from the book could be used to treat his father's illnesses. The book also described a certain god named Meng, who was responsible for the growth of all things. While reading the book, the boy's body continued to change, and he acquired unusual abilities. All this newly acquired knowledge made the young man think about his life. After thinking for a while, he finally realized that perhaps the abalone could be saved. Several hours later, events continued on the seabed. After walking for such a long time, the main character sat in the lotus position at a depth of several tens of meters and meditated. During his meditation, all he could think about was how this magical law of fruits had proven to be very useful. After all, thanks to the knowledge that was obtained from the book, the young guy could see perfectly underwater, even without glasses. And thanks to subsequent changes, he didn't even have to breathe underwater, since oxygen entered the body itself, which only increased the desire to continue practicing this method of improvement. While reading the book, it was completely unclear what changes would occur in the guy's body. But in the hero's opinion, this was now completely unimportant, since duty was much more important than such abilities. Grabbing a piece of seaweed, the young man thought that these growing ponds should be turned into a real treasure. Having swum to land, the hero decided to take a bag of seaweed with him to do something unusual. As the young man continued to walk through the forest, all he could think about was that in this situation, he needed to continue cultivating to turn the algae into something more. Suddenly, someone nearby stopped the protagonist and stepped on his bag of seaweed. The impudent man who challenged the main character turned out to be a hooligan and wanted to know what the young man was doing here. The villains even suggested that the fisherman was out of his mind and suffered from a mental disorder, since they did not understand why he needed a whole bag of seaweed. Having a strong hatred for bullies, Kurumi ordered them to stay away from him. The blonde grabbed the guy and screamed that his family owed him $5,000, and he was going to beat him up right now, because Kurumi didn't even try to pay the debt. The main character didn't like the villain's behavior, and he decided to act. Grabbing him by the face, the main character decided to resist him and squeezed his hand with all his strength. Experiencing unbearable pain, the blonde begged to let go of his hand, as he could no longer endure such humiliation. Letting go of the bully's hand, Kurumi said that the IOU was valid for 3 months, and he would repay the debt when the payment was due. As I was about to leave, at the last moment the young man turned around and told the hooligans not to contact him about this matter again. Rising from his knees, the the blonde asked his partner to call someone to kill this impudent fellow who dared to resist. A few hours later, the events continued near the main character's house. Using his new magical abilities, the young man did his best to use the seaweed as food. The teachings said that this was interference with nature. Although it was forbidden by divine rules, Kurumi realized that this way the seaweed could be turned into food. So it was necessary to test their magical abilities, and Pisces were ideal for this, since they could be fed with algae. The next morning the boy decided to check what he had done and whether he had been able to feed the fish in this way. What happened next simply shocked him, because he did not expect to see anything like this. The fattened fish increased in size several dozen times and grew literally overnight. For the boy, this was a truly impressive phenomenon, as he could not believe that it was possible to grow fish in such a short time. Fearing his new abilities, Kurumi even began to think that he was just imagining things, but in reality, it didn't happen. Having decided to try his luck in the fish trade, the main character took action and went to the seafood market. This market was chosen only because abalone and cucumbers were sold there. This market had a large selection of different seafood, and it seemed like they had everything. Sitting down next to other vendors, the young man began selling freshly grown abalone to earn some money. These abalones were amazingly fresh and looked like they had just been caught from the sea. As he got closer, a man standing nearby remarked that these abalones looked good, as if they were some unusual variety, because he had never seen anything like them before. The smart guy immediately exclaimed that this type of mollusk is called jippinbalm, and over the past few weeks he had improved the way he fed them, which is why they were able to grow so well. Suddenly another stranger approached them and did not believe that these abalones were really called jippinbalm, because they looked more like ordinary mollusks. Having started to mock Kurumi, the impudent man wanted to know how much more he was willing to sell these sea creatures for. Addressing the buyer, the young man calmly stated the price of $5,000 per piece. Such prices were nothing but ridicule, since for that money one could buy at least tens of hundreds of jipperbombs of the same size. Feeling better during the sale, Kurumi also said that if someone buys clams for the first time, he will give them a discount. The dissatisfied man was annoyed by this, as he thought that he was simply being made fun of. This is why they don't introduce Kurumi at first, but shout that they sell two-headed sea monsters here, which cost $5,000 each. Hearing this, the crowd of people were simply shocked by such a price for sea monsters and did not understand how this young man was going to sell all the abalones while they were fresh. Approaching the impudent man, one guy decided to ask Boss Van if these were really the jipperbombs. Laughing, Van said that if Kurumi really sold out the hyperbombs, he would drop everything without a second thought and bow to him 10 times. Meanwhile, a girl with pink hair came up and said that these abalones looked good. This came as a surprise to the arrogant man, as he did not expect that even one customer would agree to purchase such a product. The seemingly ordinary girl said she would take all the abalones, but asked for a discount so she could pay $4,000 for one sea monster. As it turned out, this girl's name was Master Apiki, and Van wanted to ask her why she decided to buy all this seafood. The puzzled guy literally begged Apiki not to buy this seafood, as he believed that she would be deceived. But the girl had a completely different opinion, because as the owner of a fish restaurant, she had good instincts, so Van didn't need to worry about her. Van, who did not expect such an answer, was simply shocked because he did not even know how to react to everything that was happening. A few minutes later, Master Ipika's employee arrived and took away the entire container of mollusks, and the girl herself thanked her younger brother and said that they hoped to continue their cooperation in the future. These conditions completely satisfied the main character, and he was glad that he would have a regular client. The crowd of people were simply shocked by such a large purchase from the master, and now they realized that these ears really were jippinbalm. Suddenly, Kurumi noticed Van leaving and yelled at him to stay, as he had previously promised that if the abalone was real, he would throw everything away and kiss his feet 10 times. Starting to backtrack on his words, the man insisted that it was just a joke and he wasn't serious. The young man at this time began to realize that such a big guy couldn't even answer for his words. Laughing, Kurumi ordered Van to take action since a crowd of people were already looking at them, and he had to hurry. Fearing the judgment of others, Wong realized that the whole situation was not in his favor. The scoundrel snapped his fingers and declared that he would no longer give anyone any favors. Using his guards, the villain shouted at them to beat up Kurumi as he was acting very arrogant. One of the impudent fellows began to wave his hand in order to strike. But this blow was so weak that it did not cause any harm to Kurumi. Laughing, the young man began to mock the bully, telling him that he was actually a weakling. These events caused the man to become worried, as he had never had such problems before, and now he realized that he was much weaker than his opponent. After the transformation of the magician, the young man's body became strikingly different from all the others. Now it was Kurumi's turn to strike back, as he couldn't stand the bullying. The frightened man didn't even know how to react to this, and simply continued to look straight into the eyes of his opponent. At that very second, the fight began, and it became clear who exactly would emerge victorious. As expected, the winner was Kurumi, who was able to easily defeat absolutely all enemies. He didn't leave his opponent a single chance because he was so angry at such a piece of trash like Wong. Sometime later, the events continued in a fish restaurant. A certain aristocrat ate the most delicious seafood in her life and was amazed by such fresh abalone. The rich lady didn't expect the seafood to be so fresh, as if it had just been caught. The owner of the establishment, Ipika, was very glad that her guest enjoyed the treat. The grateful girl began to hug Apiki because she finally went out to see her daughter-in-law and even ate a delicious meal. In fact, the woman explained that she was no longer the guest's daughter-in-law, since she and her brother had long since divorced. The smart lady said that she was still on Ipika's side and wanted to become related to her. The guest was very interested in whether Apiki wanted to get back together with her brother. But, as it turned out, if the girl got married again, she would have problems with the store. She had these problems because her husband was always unhappy with the fact that the restaurant owner was often not at home. That is, the guest admitted that Apiki simply no longer needs a man, and she is quite happy with the fact that she is the manager of the restaurant. Meanwhile, the main character decided to rest a little and approached a beautiful fountain. After thinking about everything that had happened, the boy realized that today he had not chosen the best way to sell shellfish. After thinking for a while, the young man realized that it would be better if he opened his own store. Suddenly, a mysterious girl appeared nearby and asked Kurumi to help her. Strong and proud Kurumi immediately told the girl that he would not help her in any way and told her to go do her homework, but she really wanted to talk to him. Despite the request, the young man still refused the girl, as he did not want to date anyone. Coming even closer, the pink-haired girl literally began to beg for help. Not understanding what was happening, the former fisherman nevertheless decided to find out what was going on. Suddenly, some informal people began to approach Kurumi and the stranger, who immediately noticed that she was asking the stranger for help. Taking out a knife, the villains came closer and closer, and it seemed that they wanted to harm the girl. Using an incredibly cute look, the stranger begged Kurumi with all his might to help her, but he only said that he couldn't help in this situation. Begging for help, the beautiful lady was ready to do everything in her power, if only the guy would agree to help her. Unable to stand such behavior from the stranger, the young man nevertheless agreed to help in such a difficult situation. The smart guy said that the hooligans should attack first since he and the girl were now on the same side. The informals became very angry, and they realized that now the uncle had become very brave because he noticed a beautiful girl next to him. A fight broke out and incredibly loud screams could be heard throughout the street. After a few minutes of fighting, the hooligans found themselves on the floor, both unconscious due to the altercation that had occurred during the fight. Trying to treat the scoundrels politely, the young man asked them not to get into a fight with a knife next time. Watching this fight, the girl was simply shocked and thought that the guy who helped her was simply wonderful. The main character did not want to respond to the girl's compliments and told her to go back to where she came from. As it turned out, the pink-haired girl explained this by the fact that her mother did not want to see her at home and kicked her out early. Then the young man asked her to find a place to spend the night. The impudent girl hugged Kurumi and said that she would only follow him, because where he was, there was her home. Sometime later, the stranger continued to follow her uncle and said that her name was Fan Kai, after which she asked his name. Unable to stand such behavior from a young girl, the guy said that his name was Kurumi and asked not to call him uncle, since he was only 24 years old. The sweet girl was only 17 years old at the time, and the guy was really much older than her, so she could safely call him uncle. The boy sighed heavily, but finally resigned himself to it, and Fan Kai continued to call him uncle. At that very moment, Dama noticed that something was wrong and immediately asked Kurumi to look at it. What they saw next greatly confused the guy, as he was angry at what was happening. It turned out that several hooligans decided to break into the building and began to smash the furniture inside. The same hooligan whom the main character had previously taught a lesson and beaten up turned out to be nearby. Enraged by this outcome of events, the young man ordered everyone to stop and decided to find out who allowed them to break in here. The impudent man didn't even want to listen to Kurumi and said that he didn't dare ask for this, and that he was also a debtor and had to return the money as soon as possible. After thinking for a bit, the young man finally realized that these scoundrels had broken into his house because of a debt. Such reproaches from a guy made the bully laugh, and he shouted that all this happened because he didn't pay his bills. Taking out a small package, Kurumi agreed and said that his family owed him money and now it was in his hands. The leader of the hooligans was very happy that the main character decided to repay the debt, so he even planned to celebrate this event. Suddenly, a large sum of money appeared near the villain's face and gradually fell to the floor. Meanwhile, the main character did something unexpected and threw a whole wad of money right in the impudent guy's face. Feeling intense rage, the criminal could not understand why they did this to him, because he was supposed to cause fear. But all this only made the young man laugh, because he always wanted to throw a wad of money to someone. After such an unusual act, the sensations were really very pleasant, because it is not every day that you get to take revenge on a criminal in such a way. The protagonist's behavior greatly angered the villain, and he immediately ordered his money to be taken away, as it was now lying on the floor. Kurumi didn't agree with these words, and said that money at the moment is not a scoundrel's money. The smart guy also noticed that the blonde would have to take the money himself, since he would no longer want to even touch it with his finger. Within a few minutes, all the enemies were already unconscious because Kurumi decided to teach them a lesson. The main villain was also lying on the floor, and the young man clutched his head, saying that he should have just taken his money and left. Experiencing severe pain, the impudent man claimed that he understood everything and would never take money from anyone again. This statement did not suit Kurumi at all, and he wanted to understand why the bandits broke into his house. But, as it turned out, the criminal did not want to answer this question, but wanted to pay off, saying that he would give $100,000 in exchange. So Kurumi told the villain that he would need to collect $100,000 and give it to him. Only then would he be free. Picking up the money from the floor, the impudent man felt a strong sense of embarrassment, because for the first time in his life, he was being humiliated like that. Fankai also noticed that his uncle was very strong and had no equal, but the young man did not think that he was that strong. Admiring the main character, the girl even asked him to become her teacher, but Kurumi decided to refuse. Suddenly, someone pushed the door sharply and decided to enter the main character's apartment. It was a strange man, like a bandit leader. In fact, this man turned out to be the father of the villain who had previously entered Kurumi's apartment and destroyed everything in the apartment. The frightened boy also complained to his father that he had been beaten and pointed his finger directly at the young man. The man turned out to be a very influential member of a criminal group and ordered his security to capture his son's offender. Looking at these guards, the boy understood that they had so much power that even laws were not important to them. And this is true, since the elderly man stated that he had never obeyed the police. Because on these islands, he is the law, and man follows his orders. The smart lady immediately took out her phone and started filming everything, because she wanted to publish this video on social networks so that as many people as possible could see what was happening here. This turn of events greatly confused the bandit, and he immediately noticed that Fankai was filming everything on camera. The smart girl recorded absolutely everything that happened on camera, and with just one click of the mouse the video will be on the internet. Hearing this, the impudent man was simply shocked, as he did not expect that in this way incriminating evidence would be obtained against him. The villain's mood instantly changed, and he became kind, after which he decided that he needed to discuss everything with Kurumi first. Addressing his son, the elderly man also asked him to apologize for the inconvenience caused. By hitting the young man in the face, the man wanted to get an apology from him, as he was too proud and thought that his father would protect him. Coming closer, the loser nevertheless apologized, although he did not want to. After the situation defused, all the guards along with the bandits began to leave, since the conflict was over. The bandit decided to turn to the main character again and ask if everything was okay with him. Fortunately, the guy replied that everything was fine. The beaten child wanted to ask his father to just leave the situation and calm down, but the man only said that he had not decided yet. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the main character's house. The young man decided to praise his companion, saying that she was really very smart. Suddenly, the phone in the guy's trouser pocket rang. After answering the call, Kurumi found out that it was his boss calling, who said that he urgently needed abalone and agreed to meet in 2 hours. Fankai was absolutely delighted because she realized that her elder brother had important things to do, and he even agreed to go with her and get the abalone. It seemed that the girl was in love with the main character, because she reacted to any of his remarks as if she admired him. A few minutes later, the main character and his partner found themselves on the pier. There were some of the guy's clients standing nearby who had already bought seafood and wanted to buy more. Suddenly, Kurumi arrived at the pier to bring the seafood they had ordered earlier. The kind seller was happy to sell as many as 50 clams at the wholesale price they had previously discussed. The owner thanked the boy for such kindness because he received a large amount of seafood in a very short time and was grateful that his services were used. Suddenly, the young man decided that he needed to thank his customers, and as a token of his gratitude, he wanted to give them 5 more clams. Nearby, Fankai carried boxes of seafood and shouted that she never wanted to work as a loader in her life. In fact, the girl had offered to help before, but she didn't care because she was terribly tired. A little embarrassed, the lady stopped whining and said that she would cope anyway, but she needed to rest a little. This worker amazed the boss and her colleague, as they did not expect that a little girl would work as a loader. Suddenly, boss noticed that her daughter, whom she did not immediately recognize, was working as a loader. These events came as a shock to the young man, as he did not expect Fan Kai's mother to be such an influential person. Trembling with anger, the woman did not understand what kind of relationship existed between Kurumi and her daughter, since she was still little. Trying to justify himself, the protagonist tried to tell how they met and why they collaborated. But the lady didn't want to listen to anything and hit the guy right in the face with all her might. The pain was truly unbearable, as the slap was inflicted by a woman who had bought a large batch of seafood, and it was not a fact that she would become a regular customer after that. After this situation passed, the events at the seafood store continued. The pink-haired girl began to apologize to the boy, saying that she got carried away, but the boy understood that she was not to blame for anything, because her parental feelings were quite understandable. Even the daughter said that her uncle was really very good because he gave her a job and protected her. And because Fan Kai's mother was wrong about her uncle, she had to drink 3 glasses of the magic drink. Laughing, Kurumi began to dissuade the woman, saying that it was okay since he was not offended, but the boss stated that she would still drink because it was her fault. Feeling very embarrassed, the lady began to drink the unknown drink and realized that it would quickly make her drunk. In fact, the drink will also symbolize their good relationship and successful collaboration in the next 2 projects. This project was highly unusual and had to be carried out thousands of miles away. Suddenly, the girl didn't have time to finish speaking, and because she was drunk, she fell asleep abruptly. The alarmed protagonist did not understand what to do in this situation and immediately came up to help. The boy felt awkward and thought that he had not expected Miss to drink so much before, but fortunately, their relationship had improved and everything was fine. After some time, the protagonist received a notification on his mobile phone that his father would be discharged from the hospital tomorrow. After this, events continued to happen in the hospital where Kurumi's father was. While packing his things to go home, his father insisted that the young man not worry about anything and just keep an eye on the fishing grounds. The smart guy told his father that everything was fine with their fishing grounds, and during this time many foreigners had managed to owe him money, so he made some money. The parents did not believe that Kurumi managed to earn about $700,000 in such a short time, since foreigners could not owe that much. Taking out his bank card, the young man said that his parents really could be trusted. Having given the bank card to his mother, the guy said that she would definitely understand everything when she received the money. For the parents, this turn of events was truly unexpected, as they could not even imagine that their son would become rich in just a few days. After the father was discharged from the hospital, the mother decided to go to the mall to cash out some money. There was a bank in the shopping center, and you could withdraw the amount that was on your bank card. A little embarrassed, the woman decided to give the bank card that her son had previously given her in order to withdraw money. For a dissatisfied man, such a client was impudent, but he decided to help her anyway. As it turned out, the cash desk the woman went to was intended only for corporate clients, and money could only be withdrawn from an ATM. The bank customer also started pushing the poor woman out, saying that she was a beggar and had no business being there. Having given up his bank card, the scoundrel decided to withdraw $100,000, and the bank employee happily agreed to help him. Suddenly, another guy appeared who decided to stop the arrogant businessman. This guy turned out to be the main character, who decided to find out if they really only cash out large amounts here. So the young man ordered the bank employee to withdraw money from his card in order to cash it out. The experienced bank customer did not understand where Kurumi got $100,000 from, because he looked like a poor man. At that very second, the bank employee reported that the main character's card now contained $2,070,000. The determined guy exclaimed that he wanted to withdraw absolutely all the money. Thus, in a few seconds, all the money was withdrawn from the bank card. After this, Kurumi decided that it was necessary to put this money in a bank safe deposit box. The bank client could not understand why the young man was acting this way. It was as if he was making fun of him. The protagonist ordered the villain to calm down and wait his turn, since he was behaving extremely impolitely. Suddenly, someone shouted for everyone to stop because there was chaos. A stranger burst into the bank and wanted to know what was going on there. The man who entered the bank was accompanied by several security guards and looked quite menacing. Kurumi's mother was worried about everything that was happening, as she understood that they were in danger. The situation made Kurumi very angry, as his mother was scared, and he wanted to teach the villain a lesson. But as it turned out, the villains knew who this guy really was. He looked completely ordinary, but possessed incredible strength. That is why the man who came hit the impudent bank client with all his might, because he behaved like an ignoramus. The offended bank customer couldn't understand what was going on, but his older brother explained that no one would dare provoke Master Kurumi, as he was very strong and couldn't be angered. Thus, the conflict was resolved, and the boy convinced the owner that they would take care of the younger brother. Turning to his parents, the boy said that they could now go in peace because they had done what was necessary. Looking at their son, the parents could not even understand how their son had become so influential in such a short time. After some time, the events continued on the street, where the young man was walking with his parents. Suddenly, someone started shouting "Uncle" at the top of their lungs, addressing Kurumi. It turned out that it was Fan Kai, who really wanted to know what his uncle was doing here. Although the young man explained that he was picking up his father from the hospital, the girl decided to talk to his parents and say hello to them. The sweet girl said that she really wanted to go to the island with Kurumi and his parents. The main character's mother also began to persuade him to go on this trip, as she understood that he had not traveled anywhere for a very long time. But the old woman agreed because they had long wanted to go on a trip, and the aunt could cook something delicious for Fan Kai. Feeling great joy, the girl exclaimed that she would immediately call her mother and tell her that she would soon go on a trip. The caring mother also decided to warn her son that this girl was still too young for him, and he should be more careful with the law. A few minutes later, the young man and his parents reached home. The kind mother said that she would soon cook for everyone, but Fan Kai did not object and looked forward to it. Sitting at the dinner table, the main character remembered that he really wanted to buy a plot of land by the sea, and said that for this he needed to save up $5 million. The surprised father wanted to understand why his son needed so much space and why this space might be needed. The smart guy said that recently the villagers had learned about the value of their shellfish, so they would want to get them. And if he didn't solve this issue now, he would never be able to solve it. Moreover, it would harm their development in the future. Suddenly, someone decided to knock on Kurumi and his family's door. An elderly man came to visit the young man. The man who came to the house represented the interests of the Naval Department, and Kurumi immediately wanted to understand why the civil servant decided to come to their house right now. The reason for the appearance of this employee was that the head of the village, while in his position, used his power for personal purposes. And this man came here precisely to investigate this incident as thoroughly as possible. This outraged the head of the family, as he did not understand how the head of the village could use power for personal purposes. Turning around, the young man asked his father to go with him, as he wanted to tell him something. The boy realized that Mr. Chun had probably sent people here to take revenge on them for the recent incident. Watching the man approach, the young man continued to say that they had learned that the shellfish were very expensive and wanted to reclaim their rights. Feeling very anxious, the old man exclaimed that they would never in their lives give up the territory that belonged to them, but the son said that they would have to do so. These words shocked the head of the family even more, as he did not understand why his son wanted to give up their territory. In fact, the boy explained that government officials think they can make money by growing abalone here. But in fact, only he can do it. This time he will not only sell the abalone at a high price, but this way he will also get rid of them, since the authorities will no longer have the ability to manipulate the Kurumi family. It was at this moment that the main character, came up with a cunning plan that would allow him to gain independence. Appearing before a government official, Kurumi exclaimed that the price for their land would be $5 million, as well as full payment of the foreign debt. This amount impressed the man, as he did not expect that ordinary villagers would ask for such a large sum of money. At that moment, the boy had already thought of everything and exclaimed that if they wanted to get these fishing grounds, they should get their money, but the father insisted that their land was not worth that kind of money. After listening to his father, the young man realized that the whole village knew how much money they made from shellfishing. In this case, such a price is not too big a loss for the city authorities. Suddenly, an elderly man turned to the main character and said that he understood him and would pass this on to the villagers, who were ready to pay $5 million for this land. Having completed the verbal agreement, the civil servant began to leave the house, as he had achieved his goal. The cunning plan worked successfully, and now all that remains is to wait for that very client who will agree to buy the land of the Kurumi family. Meanwhile, Fan Kai remembered that the young man's partners owed him a large sum of money. But everyone present in this house understood that the partners would not soon give up this money, since such large sums are quite difficult to earn in such a short time. Some time later, the events continued in the house of Kurumi's enemies. One of the villains stated that Kurumi has no idea how valuable abalone actually is. There were hundreds of thousands of tons of this seafood on Hong Kong Island alone, and if they had captured these lands, they could have earned $50 million. At the same time, the impudent people realized that old man Kurumi was seriously ill, but he was still too afraid for his land. And yet the enemies decided to come to an agreement among themselves, discussing that the master would give $4 million for the territory in order to buy it back. But they were going to split the profits from the seafood sales equally, since the two of them were going to buy the land together. The events continued a week later near the Kurumi family's territory. I turned to my friend named Chien. Kurumi paid him the transport tax, understanding that such a worker has a hard time. Upon seeing the guy, Fan Kai immediately asked who he was, and the young man explained that Chien was helping them with the rescue and transportation of food called shiotai. Abalone simply cannot do without this food, as it makes them grow incredibly quickly. Even the main character's friend did not immediately believe that this food really works, but its benefits were obvious. As a token of gratitude, Kurumi also decided to treat her employee to some scallops so that he could try them in the future. Meanwhile, a scoundrel with whom he had had a conflict earlier passed by the young man and shouted that this part of the scene now belonged to the Chun family, and they had nothing to sell here. Upon noticing the guy, Fankai immediately became nervous as he was causing her a lot of stress, while Kurumi responded calmly, saying that they just needed to leave. Without understanding what was happening, the girl realized that this scoundrel was now collecting the abalones that Kurumi had spent so much effort on. Asking his friend to calm down, the young man exclaimed that this impudent fellow would not get a single piece of seafood because he was running his business incorrectly. However, the lady could not understand why her uncle was so sure that his opponent would not be able to catch the abalone. In fact, the main character had one secret that he absolutely did not want to reveal. This secret was that Kurumi had built an underwater physical array a few days before the sea moved, the abalones were moved to the deep waters, and other people simply couldn't find them. With such unusual abilities, the young man knew that Chen Pingguei and his son would simply screw up. The next morning, events continued in the main character's house. Chen Pingguei decided to sneak into the main character's house with his son and started shouting that he wanted to return the money because Kurumi was a fraud. Seeing the enemies, the guy asked them not to disturb people at such an early hour and to explain what happened. The impudent boy shouted that Kurumi had simply cheated their family out of millions with the help of this pond and shellfish. That was why the enemy was going to do everything in his power to get his money back, since the investment had not paid off, but Kurumi understood that he had not forced anyone to sign this contract and had not guaranteed the receipt of seafood. The main character didn't care at all whether his enemies found the mollusks or not. Having a strong dislike for Kurumi, Chun Pingguei decided to take revenge on him and immediately called the police to arrest the guy. Laughing, the young man warned them not to approach him, as he could not vouch for himself. The bandit exclaimed that he would not touch Kurumi, but his parents could get hurt. Realizing that his parents were quite weak and would not be able to resist, the young man wanted to help them somehow. Angry at this scoundrel, Kurumi realized that she needed to do something and somehow take revenge on the impudent man. Chun Pingguei didn't feel guilty at all and wanted to do terrible things to the protagonist's parents to get his money back. Suddenly, someone from behind was very surprised that Chun Pingguei was talking to the young man in such a tone. This stranger turned out to be Mayor Chun, and he wanted to know why there was a conflict between such an influential person and an ordinary guy. The frightened man immediately ran up to the mayor and began to apologize for making a mistake. The main character was also shocked that the head of the district came to his home. After some time, the man provided the mayor with absolutely all the documents confirming the sale of the property. The good-natured man said that there was nothing to worry about because he was going to hand over these documents to the relevant authorities so that they could check everything thoroughly, after which he would report the results of the check. After all, even a mayor understood that the presence of such low-quality personnel in their area had a negative impact on the labor market. This negative person was Chun Pingguei, who did not behave as a businessman should. Shortly after this conflict was resolved, the mayor stated that he would like to talk to Kurumi about business. This conversation should take place not only between the mayor and the young man, but also with other representatives of the city. A large number of people gathered to provide their money to invest in the protagonist project in order to earn money and help Kurumi. The business proposals were simply impressive, as the guy was even offered to send shellfish for sale to Hong Kong and other countries. All this really scared the guy, as he was not used to being the center of attention, having previously been an ordinary city dweller. One man stood out from the crowd and began to calm all the businessmen down, saying that they did not need to argue among themselves. It was this mysterious businessman who exclaimed that he was ready to invest $100 million. Even for the mayor, this amount was impressive, as he would never have thought that such a young guy would be able to attract such large investments. Fearing deception, the young man decided to clarify whether the gentleman really wanted to invest such a large sum of money. In fact, it was just a deposit, since they would hold an auction in Hong Kong and 95% of the amount would go to Mr. Kurumi. And if they give more than $100 million, the difference will be reimbursed, and if the amount is less, there will be no reimbursement. The protagonist's parents were also shocked and believed that they had been sleeping all this time, and it was just a dream, since the offer was too luxurious. Events continued 2 weeks later in a city court. The scoundrel named Chun Pingguei was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and Zhou Hong was suspended from government service as punishment. Thus, the boy realized that the district court was fair and gave the right verdict to his enemies. Of course, all this did not happen without the intervention of the mayor, who influenced the court to make the right decision. The influential man realized that ever since the island became Kurumi, its lands began to bear good fruit. That's why the good-natured mayor hoped that this guy would take care of the economic development of their area. Having boarded his personal helicopter, the mayor again needed to return to the city, and he decided to fly away. Looking at this helicopter, the boy thought that it was obviously very convenient to get to the island, and perhaps Kurumi should buy the same one. With a heavy sigh, the entrepreneur realized that this was still a long way off, since he had not yet earned enough money to buy a helicopter. The young man clearly did not count on support and sensitive obedience from Lu Cheng, and in order to develop a personal business that would bring in profit, it was necessary to invest a large sum of money. Suddenly, some girl accidentally pushed the young man when he was walking down the street and thinking. It turned out that it was his boss, and she seemed very embarrassed to see Kurumi. Not understanding what was happening, the guy wanted to understand what the mistress was doing here, but she only repeated that everything was fine. The woman blushed and exclaimed that she could continue drinking, and, as it turned out, she was drunk at that moment. Feeling dissatisfied, the young man realized that he did not know what to do in this situation, since the woman did not even give her address before falling asleep. Sometime later, the events at Kurumi's house continued to happen. The drunk woman was lying on the bed and felt very dizzy due to the large amount of alcohol she had drunk. Meanwhile, the main character was thinking that he couldn't stay here for long, as he urgently needed to develop his business. Suddenly the boss woke up and asked Kurumi to pour her some water. The shameless woman exclaimed again that she urgently needed to drink water. She literally began to act like a child, as she did not understand her situation and did not realize where exactly she was. The girl had strong hallucinations, which made her even think that Kurumi was a teapot that should contain water. The young man felt a strong sense of awkwardness, as he did not understand how to act in this situation, and began to stop his boss. A few hours later, the events continued again at the young man's house, where the boss was already apologizing for getting drunk and losing control. The guy wasn't too embarrassed by this situation, and he still decided to find out why the woman got so drunk yesterday. It was obvious that the boss was not very keen on answering this question, as it was inconvenient for her. Bowing her head, the woman explained that she had nothing left and was now bankrupt. The woman burst into tears and explained that she had made a mistake and paid off the seafood store, and that she also had an external debt of $3 million. After listening to his interlocutor, the young man realized that he did not know how to support people, but he needed to say something. So the main character decided to help in another way and took out his phone, saying that money was not a problem for him. So, the regular guy was going to transfer a whopping $3 million to pay off his former boss's debt. The frightened woman immediately began to stop her supplier, saying that he did not need to do this. After all, the interlocutor understood that he was just starting to work, and it was not worth spending all the money on it, since there would be nothing left for business development. The unwavering young man stated that he would help in this situation in any case, since he could freely dispose of such a sum. In addition, the pink-haired woman was the first business partner, and it was she who first decided to buy seafood from Kurumi. Having raised her hand to the guy, the woman nevertheless decided to thank him somehow. The co-worker was so grateful to Kurumi that she immediately hugged him because she realized that in this situation, no one would have done that except this guy. At that very moment, the woman realized that she was doing something wrong because she should not have hugged her colleague. This caused the embarrassed woman to pull away and start apologizing. Kurumi continued to support her, saying that he understood her. The good-natured guy decided to leave the room and said that the woman could sleep a little longer, and in the meantime, he would take care of business. Thinking about Kurumi, the pink-haired girl couldn't believe that he did exactly that and helped in such a difficult situation. A few hours later, the events continued at a depth of 300 m, where a large number of formidable sharks lived. Not far from the menacing sharks was the main character, who continued to improve his abilities on the ocean floor. Opening his eyes, the young man felt a sudden realization dawn on him, as he was very close to the predators. The enlightenment method was supposed to endow animals with spiritual power, thanks to which they became faithful helpers. Looking at the sharks, the guy did not understand what was happening, since he did not receive any reaction from them, although he performed the technique. This was all rather stupid, as even the dogs began to run in circles and wag their tails while this technique was being used. I continued to watch the predators, but Kurumi noticed that the sharks began to wag their tails, like those dogs that live on the street. After a while, the sharks began to circle around as if their behavior was no different from that of dogs. I think that the cultivation technique was used in vain. The young man still decided to ask the shark if it understood him. As soon as the sharks heard this question, they immediately began to nod, indicating that they understood Kurumi. Thanks to such an unusual method of cultivation, the main character managed to endow the sharks not only with spiritual strength, but also with intelligence. Now, these amazing animals could rise in the hierarchy among individuals of their species, and perhaps, thanks to sharks, they could create their own underwater legion. After Kurumi reached land, he found himself on his own island, where tower cranes were installed, as well as radar surveillance. In order to be able to contact any person on the planet, a satellite network was installed, as well as a backup power generator. Thanks to money and investors who decided to invest a large amount of money, the most advanced technologies were installed on the island. After looking at all the equipment that was on the island, Kurumi was very pleased, as he never thought that he would be able to own such luxurious equipment. The only thing that really upset the young man was that all this equipment would cost no less than $80 million. Meanwhile, events took place in the 1,000-mile forest belt, where Yin Man, Kurumi's old comrade, reflected on how hard-working he really was. In fact, the man was very angry because he thought he was supposed to earn a lot of money, but in fact he was just grazing cattle in the field. Due to an allergy to feathers, the employee also sneezed very often, which caused severe discomfort. Suddenly, the main character came up to him from behind and explained that the duties of grazing the cattle were a simple division of labor, and someone needed to look after the sea, and someone else needed to look after the forest. This answer completely satisfied Yin Man, and he agreed that he would take care of the forest, and Kurumi would take care of the sea. The good-natured colleague also invited the protagonist to a barbecue, as he sincerely hoped that they would be able to eat deliciously together thanks to the animals grazing in the pasture. At that very moment, the tablet that was in the young man's hands began to make strange sounds. As it turned out, the sign showed that a ship had entered their waters, and the signal on the radar reflected this. They were probably poachers who wanted to catch seafood without asking Kurumi's permission. Literally a few minutes later, Kurumi and Yin Man were already on a huge boat to see who had sailed into their territory. The main character, using a walkie-talkie, began to call the villains who had sailed into foreign territory. In response, the guy only heard that he shouldn't try to stop the poachers because if he did, he would get into trouble. Very angry, the protagonist and his colleague realized that it was too late to call the marine police, which meant they would have to sort out themselves. Having reached the enemy ship, he was captured, and thus absolutely all the villains were defeated. The arrogant man that Kurumi captured said that he would still come back after being freed. Realizing that he couldn't just let the scoundrels go, the young man decided to threaten him and grabbed his arm, using a painful hold. Laughing, Kurumi asked the villain if he really thought he would be released. Feeling great pain, the silent wanderer continued to endure, thinking that this would somehow relieve him of his guilt. Suddenly, someone shouted that they would now load the water cannon and fire a shot. Seeing the approaching danger, Yin Man decided to warn his ally, and said that he needed to escape urgently. A water cannon shot was fired, giving the impression that it hit Kurumi directly. The incident could not have happened without the water police, and government officials had to be called in to detain the criminals. The young man was very grateful to the police, and, as it turned out, they had been trying to catch the pirates for a long time, but they were always one step ahead. The brave guy simply said that there was no need for gratitude, since he was just doing his job. Next time, the scoundrel will not be able to escape responsibility so easily, since the brave man was not going to wait for the police, and he himself could become justice for the thief. Meanwhile, the friend decided to run up to Kurumi and ask how this was possible, because the pressure of the water cannon was simply colossal. The worried young man also realized that his comrade should not only be thrown over the fence, but also his health should be harmed, although in fact, Kurumi simply looked like he had taken a shower and did not have a single scratch on him. The comrade nevertheless asked the hero to share his secret, since he was very interested in why he remained unharmed. Kurumi decided to ask Yin Man if he wanted to study too, and the question immediately sparked genuine interest from his comrade. Thanks to his resourcefulness, Kurumi came up with an unusual method for his comrade, thanks to which he was able to teach him an unusual technique. While preparing delicious food, Yin Man had to stand still and endure hunger. Smelling the incredibly delicious smell of food, the guy couldn't resist asking if he could have at least a piece. But eating food was impossible, because Kurumi said that his comrade needed to starve himself if he wanted to develop this skill, and he would understand in time. The fish was grilled and was also very crispy, and its smell was simply amazing, which made Yin Man very angry. Continuing to eat the fish, the hero thought that this fool really believed everything, but next time he would definitely teach him magic. Suddenly, someone nearby shouted that it was time for them to leave, as they had already arrived. Feeling extremely dissatisfied, Yin Man exclaimed that outsiders were not allowed to enter here, since this was private territory. But, as it turned out, it was Fan Kai who asked his uncle to give her his hand and heart. Looking at his girlfriend, the young man could not understand why she came here, but, as it turned out, it was a surprise. The comrade couldn't understand what was going on here, since he had never seen Kurumi interact with girls before. The lady also came to this island to walk on it, because she wanted to look at it. Not understanding what was going on, his friend wanted to know when Kurumi found a girlfriend, but he just said that there was no point in talking nonsense, and they weren't even a couple. In fact, there was another beauty on the island, and that was Boss, and also Fankai's mother. Feeling awkward, the woman said that she wanted to see the island too, as she now wanted to be friends with Kurumi since he had lent her an incredibly large amount of money. The smart woman understood that in this situation it was necessary to do everything possible to thank her savior, and said that she could help with something on the island as a part-time job. Watching the woman, Yin Man appreciated his comrade's choice and said that Fankai and her mother were incredibly beautiful. His friend's behavior was unacceptable, and Kurumi decided to calm him down a little by throwing him into the water. The smart guy told his former boss that they should talk at home, and the woman couldn't figure out what Yin Man would do in that case, but he should be fine. While in the water, Ian felt hostility towards Kurumi, as he did not expect such meanness from him. Several hours passed, and the events on the private island of Kurumi continued to unfold. Fankai was incredibly embarrassed, and said that it was all his uncle's fault. It was the uncle's fault that the girl's stomach was about to burst, because all the food was so delicious, and she couldn't stop. Feeling afraid, Kurumi said that the girl can eat absolutely anything she wants, because there is nothing wrong with it. The happy girl also said that all her friends really liked the photos of this island. That's why Fankai decided to ask Kurumi if he could invite all of her friends to this island, and the boy happily agreed. Coming closer, the young girl decided to thank her uncle and immediately hugged him. Fan immediately called all her friends, and they immediately decided to sail to the island. Both girls were very surprised by such an unusual invitation, but at the same time they were not surprised that their friend invited them, because she wanted to show off the very guy she was constantly talking about. Watching Kurumi closely, the girls immediately realized that this was not an uncle, but a guy who was too young, and also very handsome. Starting to feel embarrassed, Fan asked the girls to stop teasing the young man who had agreed to host her friends on his private island. So the lady decided to introduce her to her friends, and, as it turned out, they were her classmates. The girl with brown hair was named Lee Jean, and she was very happy to be on this island. But the girl with purple hair was called Millie. She was born in the United States of America, but lives in China. The guys Fankai was friends with also came. One was called Tang Jinbian, and the other was Luong. The impudent fellow immediately approached Fan and said that he did not want to stay on this miserable island, but wanted to go to Bali together because it was more romantic there. As it turned out, Fan had only called this guy here so that Li Jin wouldn't be left alone, so the young man immediately calmed down. The girl got very angry with this guy and said that he could go wherever he wanted, but he shouldn't touch her. Coming closer to her uncle, the lady announced to all her friends that they would now go to the animals that were on this island. Fankai's comrades watched everything that was happening and were very unhappy. The disgruntled young man wanted to teach this damned fisherman a lesson because he did not understand how he dared to touch Fanya. And then an idea came to the villain, and he immediately looked at the foliage that was nearby. The evil, impudent man thought that if the forest burned down, then Kurumi would certainly lose absolutely all the money that he invested in the construction of this island. The scoundrel's comrade said that this could not be done, since they would be guilty of arson. The impudent man did not react to these words in any way and stated that he would simply teach Kurumi a lesson for her impudent act towards Fankai. The island was home to a large number of different animals. For example, sea lions were found nearby. There were a large number of dolphins swimming around the island, moving in schools. While watching the animals, the girls were amazed that literally every animal obeyed Kurumi. The boy managed to skillfully train each of the animals, thanks to which they happily carried out the commands that were given to them. This whole spectacle brought genuine joy to the friends, and they even asked to be taught how to train animals as well. The young man said that he could not do this because it was too long a process, but magic helped him with it anyway. Meanwhile, the protagonist's friend brought two hooligans who wanted to do terrible things. The arrogant guy started yelling at Yin Man and threatening him because he had influential parents. Not understanding what was going on, Kurumi immediately decided to find out why the two guys were detained. The comrade immediately explained to the young man that these two guys were trying to set fire to the forest on the island. This surprised Kurumi, as he didn't expect a guest to act like this. Laughing, Yin Man exclaimed that these guys needed to be treated properly. The comrades were going to call the police to hand over these scoundrels, but the impudent ones were hoping for this, since they certainly had connections in the police. After thinking for a while, the young man finally decided that these scoundrels needed to be freed. One of the boys immediately started to mock, saying that Kurumi was simply not capable of more, and would just let them go without punishing them. Grabbing the criminal by the head, Kurumi decided to explain to him that just because he allowed them to roam the island, it didn't mean they should cause trouble. That's why the good-natured guy still decided to let Fan Kai's young classmates go, since they didn't even understand who they were dealing with. Meanwhile, the culprit of all this approached his uncle and apologized to him. The girl sincerely believed that it was she who brought them here, and they almost set the forest on fire, so it was her fault. The main character began to calm his friend, saying that it was not her fault. While leaving the island, the impudent man thought that he would definitely take revenge on Kurumi. Sometime later, they decided to have a big barbecue on the island to relax a bit and eat some good food. The food was incredibly delicious, and the island's guests were simply shocked by Kurumi's hospitality. The local seafood turned out to be much tastier than what was prepared in the cities where the girls used to live. The pink-haired girl approached her employer and said that she felt weak, so Kurumi suggested that she take a little rest. Feeling responsible, Fan Kai's mother did not want to rest, as she understood that she had promised to work hard. Suddenly, the girl began to lose consciousness and fell right on Kurumi. During the fall, the lady accidentally kissed the young man, but did not attach any serious importance to it. This event was unexpected for the guy, because he did not expect that his first kiss would happen exactly like this. As soon as the lady realized what she had done, she immediately fell into a stupor, as she was in a state of shock. After collecting the dishes, the young man noticed how the woman began to run away, as she was very embarrassed. Meanwhile, Fan Kai was watching everything that was happening and noticed that Kurumi was indeed very cunning because he made everything happen by accident. Suddenly, the young girl also decided to kiss the young man, doing it herself. As it turned out, Lady did this so that the kiss would be honest and not accidental, as it was with her mother. The girl's embarrassed friend also said that she saw everything and it left her very embarrassed. Turning around, Kurumi began to justify herself, saying that kissing in their country is a sign of politeness and gratitude, and there is nothing special about it. Having agreed with the guy, the girl began to act and, as a sign of gratitude, also kissed him. To silence the young man, his friend told him not to tell anyone about it and thanked him for the invitation. Reflecting on everything that was happening, the main character did not understand at all what was happening here. Several hours later, the event continued on the seabed where lobsters were nearby. Looking at everything that was happening, the hero thought that in less than 2 months this ecosystem was almost completely filled. These natural wonders were simply spectacular, and Kurumi was amazed at how attractive this environment was for the precious shrimp and red corals. In this scenario, this place near the island should have become a gold mine, since coral is a very expensive material. After landing on land, Kurumi continued preparing equipment on the island. Not far from the guy was Fan Kai's friend, who was talking to some guy about the need to take someone off the island. Turning around, the young man immediately realized that that same Zhenyan would not calm down and would want to take revenge on them. Following the plan of the girl who was talking on the phone, the whole company ended up on a boat moving in an unknown direction. The girl's idea was that they needed a reason to go ashore, but she said that she had a really bad stomach ache. The main character began to feel sorry for the girl, saying that she might have an inflammation, but he understood that she was a bad person and an even worse actress. The excited lady thanked Kurumi, but it was clear that she was pretending. Suddenly the girl felt unbearable pain, which immediately caused her severe shock. The young lady began to hold her stomach and scream that she was in a lot of pain. No one understood what was going on, and Fan Kai was very worried about her friend. In fact, the main character influenced the fact that his friend had a stomach ache, since witchcraft can both help and harm people. And if a girl likes to pretend, then she should feel real pain. After some time, the company found itself on dry land, where an ambulance had already arrived to help their friend. Kurumi wasn't worried about the girl at all, and said that she would be fine and there was no reason to worry so much. Suddenly, a strange van with unfamiliar people inside began to drive up nearby. In fact, there were only 3 vans, although only an ambulance was supposed to arrive. Zhenyan came out of one of the vans and exclaimed that he promised Kurumi that he would be in big trouble, and he kept his word. Unable to bear such impudence, the young man took action and began to attack the scoundrel. First, the brave guy hit the villain who dared to lure them into a trap with all his might. The friendly-looking young man began to shake the fist he had just used to hit the scoundrel and asked again what Zhenyan wanted from him. No one present could understand how Kurumi managed to strike so quickly. Feeling intense pain from the blow, Zhenyan once again tried to take revenge for being made a fool of. Approaching the impudent man, the main character asked him to repeat what he had said again. But Zhenyan didn't dare to do that, and after a few minutes, his pants were completely wet. The humiliated and frightened scoundrel sat on the floor and simply did not know what to do next. In an attempt to calm the bratty child, Kurumi asked him to learn how to be scary without changing diapers. Looking at his comrade, the hero asked him to deal with the other enemies who had arrived here. This request made Yin Man happy, as he had not had any combat practice for a long time. In fact, the comrade simply misunderstood the young man, and all he needed to do was get all the enemies out of here to hell. Suddenly, a few men in the back started clapping because of everything that was happening, and one of them decided to ask the guys if they wanted to serve in the army. The second person, standing near the stranger, turned out to be Mayor Liu, with whom Kurumi had already collaborated. The mayor also decided to tell him that his friend, named Nafti, was nearby. He served as a party officer in the Navy. For the young man, this was really surprising because he did not understand how the party could work with the state because he was a political commissar, and he did not know that Shan's old friends were so good. At that very moment, the police arrived and ordered the arrest of all the criminals guilty of the fight. Kurumi was also ordered to show his hands, but he stated that they were law-abiding citizens and had not broken the law. After listening to the guy's answer, the policeman exclaimed that they were guilty since they were beating people right on the street, and for this they would be arrested. As it turned out, this policeman was Zhun Yan's uncle, whom he called for help. Thus, Kurumi's arrest was successfully carried out, and he watched everything that was happening and found it really interesting. The mayor and his comrade were also detained, and they insisted that the matter should be treated with caution. In fact, the police did not even want to listen to some of the men and said that they could only ask any questions at the police station. At that moment, no one except Kurumi knew that these two men had great influence in the city. Only the main character understood that this show would go on. Several hours later, the events continued at the police station, where the young man and his friends were taken. The interrogation began, and the police officer accused Kurumi of eating her nephew's teeth. Taking out a pair of pliers, the corrupt policeman stated that there was nothing wrong with it, but Kurumi would still pay for what she had done. The protagonist did not react to these threats in any way, but only asked the corrupt policeman if he was in pain or was afraid of being sued. The impudent man didn't care at all and said that the criminal could do whatever he wanted, but he would still be convicted. After all, no outsider can get in here because this is an interrogation room, and not even a fly can get in here without a key. Laughing, the young man asked again, "Is it true that no one can enter this room without a key?" Not understanding why this question was asked, the man replied that it was indeed so. Meanwhile, Kurumi used her magical abilities to break the handcuffs and escape to freedom. While watching the prisoner, the police officer was simply shocked when he saw that an ordinary guy had broken his handcuffs. For a guy with magical powers, it was quite simple, and now he was free. Feeling very afraid, the policeman knelt down and wanted to know if he really would not be beaten because he was a civil servant. Kurumi didn't react to this statement and hit the villain in the face with all his might. The guy didn't care at all about the threats, the policeman's hysteria, and his screams, because he wanted to achieve justice. The frightened man began to cry and shouted for them to stop beating him, as he was in a lot of pain. Sitting back down on the chair he had been sitting on earlier, Kurumi told the policeman to open the door with his key and get out of here. Still angry at the guy, the policeman started to walk away and said he would be back for him soon. The policeman was simply furious and even thought about taking a gun and using it during subsequent interrogation. Suddenly, the corrupt policeman noticed that one of the prisoners began to leave the cell. The man who was released was the mayor of the city, but the corrupt policeman did not know this yet and wanted to find out who had released him. Coming closer to the prisoner, the man shouted at his subordinate and asked who decided to free the bespectacled man. Turning around, the policeman said that he was the one who let the man with glasses go and did not see any problem with it. It turned out that the man who freed the mayor was the chief, and he could not miss such a grand event. Feeling dissatisfied, the experienced policeman wanted to know from his subordinate why he had detained this man. Feeling guilty, the man began to explain that they were the ones who broke the law and beat people. The boss couldn't stand it and started insulting the scoundrel for making a fatal mistake. Bowing his head, the police chief apologized to the mayor for the inconvenience caused, and he would definitely punish those responsible for this incident. Upon hearing this apology, the corrupt policeman realized that he had detained the city mayor. After some time, the main character was already free, and he decided to invite the mayor to his island. The mayor was also free and insisted that they came even without an invitation, but since Kurumi was inviting, he would gladly come. In fact, the mayor and his friend admired the guys who started doing business on the island and even wanted to involve them in their military competitions. Meanwhile, events continued to occur near multi-story buildings. Fankai was nearby and was very happy to see her uncle because she missed him. The happy girl said that her friend immediately felt better as soon as she was brought to the hospital. And now that Fankai was free, she was going to go shopping with the guys, but they knew that going shopping with a woman was the worst thing that could happen to a man. The offer to go shopping didn't sit well with young man, and he chickened out, starting to run away, while Kurumi tried to stop him, saying that they had to go through this together. However, the shopping started, and now Kurumi's wardrobe has more clothes because Fankai wanted to help her uncle with clothes. The good-natured girl also picked out glasses for the main character, in which he looked quite brutal. Looking at himself in the mirror, The guy couldn't understand how people still spent so much time on their clothes. The friend still persuaded the young man to buy clothes, and he had to fork out some money to buy himself a couple of things. The confused store clerk wanted to ask the guy a question and asked if he was really dating this girl. Feeling ashamed, Kurumi began to deny it, saying that he was not dating her and that she was just his friend. Events continued to occur on the island, and the turtle population gradually increased. Every day, there were more and more turtles, and their numbers were simply impressive. The pink-haired girl suddenly decided to invite the young man to the island, and he wanted to know what the reason was. In fact, the reason was that academics had arrived on the island. Looking at these people, Kurumi didn't understand at all why they came here and what exactly they needed. One of the women who arrived began to tell us that these turtles are listed in the Red Book and are originally from Warsaw. Until recently, there were only 3 of them in the whole world. Not understanding what was happening, the guy still decided to ask who this woman was who was talking about the animals on the island. The unknown woman's daughter said that this was her mother and that she was a biologist. The boy immediately panicked as he realized what kind of animals were being protected here, but they had lived here before his arrival. And the most obvious reason for these turtles to appear was that they were in the wild. That's why Kurumi wanted the biologist to leave here, and the entire area would now be protected. But Fan Kai first calms the young man down, saying that he shouldn't be so upset because they found a valuable animal. Reflecting on everything that was happening, the hero understood that if this territory became a reserve, then it would be the end for them. The plane he bought hasn't even been delivered yet, and its dominance in fishing hasn't even begun yet. Kurumi was simply tormented by mental pain, and he didn't know what to do in this situation. After thinking for a while, the uncle finally came to the conclusion that it was necessary to contact the mayor. Perhaps he could help in this situation. A few hours later, the boy returned to Fan Kai, and she noticed that he was in a very good mood. Luckily, the mayor said he could still help in exchange for one favor. Unfortunately, at that time, it was completely unclear what kind of service he had agreed to provide. At the very least, there was hope that the mayor would be able to protect the fishing grounds. This was good news, so they decided to have a snack to get some energy. Looking at Fan Kai's mother's necklace, the young man remembered something. The boy immediately thought that jade would enhance his magic, which gave him an idea, and he said that tomorrow they would all go to a jewelry store together, and he would buy them jade pendants as gifts. The woman, embarrassed, said that there was no point in doing this, since the jade pendant was very expensive. But the young girl was very glad that her uncle was very generous. That's why the next morning the company went to the Jindo business district. Passers-by were looking at the main character all this time and thought that he was dressed like a policeman and even brought girls. The people looking at them were discussing the girls, saying that the girl with pink hair had very long legs and was too good for him. In fact, the guy didn't care what people thought of him at all, as he headed to a jewelry store to buy a pendant. When Kurumi thought about this purchase, she only wanted to test whether his plan would work, since jade was supposed to improve magical abilities. There were a large number of different pendants to choose from, but not all of them suited the guy. The pendants came in a variety of shapes and designs, making the choice simply enormous. The jewelry store employee even began to get indignant, because Kurumi had tried out many different pendant options, but none of them suited him. The smug boy continued to choose pendants because he needed to find something special. The problem with these pieces of jewelry was that all of these pendants had very poor engraving. But in reality, Kurumi was only looking at all these decorations in order to absorb their power. Absorbing this power gave the young man a simply indescribable feeling of strength. The employee tried to select jewelry with the utmost care so that the client would purchase it. But suddenly another guy approached the client and offered to go up to the second floor together. The second floor was intended for VIP clients. Regular visitors are usually not allowed there, but today they decided to make an exception. At the jewelry store, the manager was very polite to this poor guy, and all the employees immediately noticed it. In reality, the administrator wanted to offer the poor man an ornament so expensive that he wouldn't be able to buy it, and all this was just to humiliate Kurumi. At first, the scoundrel wanted to say that their designer's name was Liu Kai, and he was also the director of this store. No one present knew how rich Kurumi was. The first piece of jewelry on the second floor was a jade bracelet. It was made of excellent green jade, not the best bracelet in the world, but the best in this store. The price of this jewelry was $8 million, and the young man decided to examine the bracelet as carefully as possible. In fact, the guy was very interested in how much stronger this jade was than all the others. After examining the jewelry, the administrator decided to ask the guy what he thought about this bracelet. The client was smart and insisted that the shape of this decoration was perfect. It was perfectly round. However, this perfect shape begins after a half-millimeter indentation from the ends. Hearing this, the administrator could not believe it, since the human eye is not able to detect such things. Declaring this to be nonsense, the The scoundrel exclaimed that this customer should be thrown out of the store because he was a liar. The arrogant employee sincerely believed that slander entails criminal liability and hoped that Kurumi would realize her actions. That's why Brave Boy said that he was willing to make a bet, and if he was wrong, he would immediately transfer 1 million as compensation. But if he was right, then he should show all the jade in this shop. From a first glance at the administrator, the main character realized that he was a gambling man, so he agreed to bet. Using a measuring device, the employee immediately began measuring the diameter of the bracelet to see who had actually won the bet. However, the worried man admitted that he had thus lost the argument and was willing to show off all the jade jewelry in the store. Thanks to the young man's attentiveness, the cunning plan worked, which allowed him to become saturated with the energy of the magic stones. After some time, the administrator was simply shocked, as the client was shown absolutely all the jade jewelry, but he did not choose a single one. As it turned out, the main character's insidious plan was to absorb all the power from the stones he was researching. The arrogant worker decided to approach the main character, saying that if he was so smart, then he should make the jewelry himself. After thinking for a while, the young man came to the conclusion that this was indeed a good idea and that he should really take up making jewelry. With this new idea, Kurumi decided to ask the store staff if they sold rough stones. But the staff told him that if he wanted to buy rough stones, he would have to go to the jade market and try his luck there. The experienced administrator knew that he should not go to the jade market, since it was literally impossible to find real jade there. This was not a problem for the guy, and he really wanted to try to find a stone from which he could create a piece of jewelry himself. The administrator agreed to take the protagonist to the market, and for this, Kurumi was very grateful to him. It was the boy's first time sitting in such an expensive car, especially on the way to the jade market. The man immediately felt a strong interest and decided to ask the hero what kind of car he represented, but the guy replied that he did not have a car, but he had a ship and a helicopter. There was a girl sitting next to him in the car, and it seemed to her that this policeman definitely liked to brag. The formerly arrogant employee turned out to be a pretty nice guy and offered the main character a drink. After thinking about the possible drink, the young man came to the conclusion that he would like to drink cola, but he could also drink Sprite. These words made the girl laugh a lot, because she understood that VIP clients choose the best drinks, and only country bumpkins drink cola and Sprite. For these words, the administrator immediately scolded the girl, since it is not appropriate to be rude to a VIP client. A few minutes later, events at the antique market continued. There were a lot of people at the market. Usually, stone buyers take stones and give them to experts, who in turn try to find jade in them, and do not analyze the appearance of these stones. But, unfortunately, even the best craftsmen find jade with a probability of 20% is a kind of gambling. That is why the young man decided to try his luck, although the administrator did not understand why he needed all this, since he did not even have basic knowledge in this area. Using her magical abilities, Kurumi realized that she could not see jade, but she could feel it. Looking at the stones that were sold at the market, the boy immediately realized that some of the stones were fakes. He sighed heavily, realizing that this was definitely a gamble, because none of the 10 stones contained jade. A disgruntled rock seller at the market said that people don't come here to have fun, and if Kurumi is looking for trouble, he should go somewhere else. After a long search, the required stone was finally found. Having grabbed this stone, the young man immediately decided to find out how much it cost, but, according to the owner of this stone, only idiots bought it at random. That's why the fat man said he would sell the stone for $500. The people watching all this were thinking only that these days everyone is tempting fate with stones, and this guy might get lucky and become rich. The stone was successfully purchased, and the seller began to cut it to check if there was jade inside. From the man's surprise, one could tell that this stone actually contained jade. After the stone was cut, green jade was found inside. Seeing this, the administrator was simply shocked, as he did not expect that he would be able to find the gem on the first try. No one could believe what they saw, as they did not expect that an ordinary amateur would be able to find such an expensive treasure on the first try. People immediately started approaching him as the main character, saying that they wanted to buy the stone for $80,000 or $100,000. Even a jewelry store employee offered $200,000 to buy the stone. The administrator was indeed interested in purchasing, as a piece of jewelry made from such jade would cost around $400,000. Suddenly, the protagonist exclaimed that he would gladly sell this stone for $150,000. But he will keep the remaining $50,000 to teach his assistant a lesson, because rich people don't drink cola. So the administrator yelled at the girl, telling her to go back to the office and do the paperwork, because workers like her just scare away customers. Thinking about everything that was happening, Kurumi realized that this worker would no longer be able to even afford to buy cola. 10 minutes later, 3 more jades were discovered. One was glass, another was imperial green, and the third was red jade. In the last 10 years, there has not been as much jade discovered in the entire market as this guy has discovered, and people even started to think he was a magician. People even started asking this guy to teach them how to find it. Not in principle, but he just kept saying that they needed to practice more. Suddenly, some guy came up behind the main character and decided to attract attention to himself. Two scoundrels snuck up behind them and were very happy that Kurumi had found so much jade, but they wanted to buy the stones from him for less. Starting to laugh, the impudent fellow exclaimed that they had been at this market for a long time, so they would not leave him offended. The young man could not understand what was going on and wanted to know if they really wanted to take the jade from him. At that very moment, another man began to approach the hooligans and decided to ask if they still had courage. This man was accompanied by an incredibly beautiful girl, and he was also dressed like a rich man. The scoundrel immediately realized that it was Nip Yuan and wanted to run away from here so that there would be no consequences. Even the protagonist was surprised that some Nip Yuan came here, but the administrator knew that Kurumi's skill would not go unnoticed. This man turned out to be the company's president named Nip Yuan, and he wanted to meet Kurumi in person. And so, one of the richest people in the city decided to meet with a main character, who until recently was very poor. After some time, the events in the jewelry store continued. Absolutely all the employees of the jewelry store were simply in shock, as they did not understand how this country bumpkin could meet with their boss. None of those present could understand what their owner was doing in the store and why he was bowing down to this scoundrel. In fact, the main character came to the store only to sell all his jade, which he had been looking for so long. The appraisal resulted in a huge amount of money in total, as the apple green jade was worth $26 million, the common green jade was worth $33 million, and the spring jade was worth $50 million. This amount was simply impressive, and Fan Kai also decided to go into the jewelry store to see what was going on. Thanks to his unusual skill, the young man managed to earn more than $100 million in a day. The frightened girl even thought that her uncle wanted to trick her into going into the store because she didn't believe that this jade was really worth that much. There was another proposal, which was that if Kurumi agreed, they were willing to offer $500 million for the two stones, namely the spring jade and green jade. The amount of $500 million was even more impressive, and the girls were pleasantly shocked to hear it. After apologizing to the jade buyers, Kurumi said that they would keep the two stones for their personal use. As it turned out, the boy decided to give his subordinates pendants made from these stones. Because of this, the girls were incredibly grateful to their uncles, as they now had incredibly expensive gifts. But at the moment of showing gratitude, the main character found it incredibly difficult to breathe because he was being squeezed. With a heavy sigh, Nip Yuan admitted that he used to think of himself as a generous person, but now Kurumi had surpassed him. Suddenly, a large number of military personnel burst into the store, all of them in uniform and with weapons and literally ready for battle. Not understanding what was happening, Kurumi was simply shocked by this turn of events and watched everything that was happening. After some time, the main character was transferred to the training ground, where all the soldiers wished him good health and addressed him as a fellow instructor. Thus, the boy immediately understood that this was what Uncle Yin had asked for, but the man exclaimed that if Kurumi did not want this, then he could send all the soldiers back to the Northern Fleet. The good-natured man knew that the boy was capable of this, and did not understand whether it would be so difficult for him to become an instructor for these soldiers, but the hero believed that he would have nothing to teach these guys. After hearing the refusal, the man ordered the military to remove the missile launcher from here, but the young man immediately became interested and wanted to know if there really was a missile launcher nearby. The soldier said that they even had such a weapon and the guy would really need it, especially after that incident with the hooligans in his forest. The main character realized that his comrade was telling the truth, and the flare gun on the island would not harm him. This missile launcher can also be used against pirate ships during attacks. The gentleman was very upset that the young man still refused to become an instructor, since this missile launcher is only for military use, and Kurumi refuses the title of instructor. After thinking for a while, the hero finally said that thanks to the soldiers, there's peace in their country, and if the country needs him, then he will definitely serve. Coming closer, the experienced soldier said that the guy should stop fooling around and calm down. Thanks to the mayor's best friend, Kurumi has now become an instructor for the military and will have to train them. To keep the hero from getting bored, he took Yin Man with him, who was very happy to be there, since he no longer had to constantly look at the radars. The young man's best friend also didn't understand why he got up so early, but as it turned out, he was now a drill sergeant, and this was his job. As a token of gratitude, Kurumi also decided to give a gift to her comrade. This gift turned out to be a watch with an emerald, since the hero considered Yin Man to be a really good guy. The friend happily accepted this gift and thanked his comrade, saying that now he was truly an influential person, since the soldiers treated him with respect. These soldiers were truly the best in the Northern Fleet, and some of them soon became lieutenants. Other soldiers who achieve the greatest success may even become captains. That was why his comrade doubted that Kurumi would be able to handle such a difficult task. Smiling, the protagonist understood that it was hard to believe, but he would do everything possible to properly train the soldiers. So the young man rushed to train the soldiers and decided to ask them what they were doing and what was currently going on in their training program. The soldiers decided not to answer and said that Kurumi was an instructor and he needed to train all the soldiers. One of the students decided to approach the guy and ask what the teacher would teach him. Laughing, the hero exclaimed that the soldiers had chosen the instructor with the best combat skills, so the training would be combat-based. I don't understand anything. The students were simply shocked because they didn't expect such determination from the teacher. After this, the chief instructor announced that whoever could withstand his 3 blows would receive a reward. One of the strongest warriors decided to go into battle with Kurumi, since everyone considered him a weakling. The determined guy understood that he could literally kill the new instructor because he was too strong for him. Despite this, the hero decided to give the soldier a head start and ordered him to attack first. Taking advantage of his advantage, the young soldier rushed into battle and began swinging his fist to strike. But at that very second, the boy noticed that the instructor was using some magical abilities invisible to the human eye. With just one blow, Kurumi pushed the strongest soldier away, sending him crashing into a tree. The force of such a blow was truly impressive, as one push of the hand could throw a soldier several tens of meters away. The alarmed soldiers did not understand how this could happen, because the instructor's opponent was very strong. Some of those present even started to worry about the rival instructor and decided to ask him if he was okay. Fortunately, the guy was okay. Kurumi exclaimed that he knows that everyone in front of him is a soldier, and they should be proud of it, because they have the right to be, but they should remember that there are many people in this world who are stronger than them, and they should not forget this fact and not let their pride blind them. After all, the instructor's task at this training ground is to make absolutely all soldiers much stronger. Absolutely all the soldiers realized that they were wrong because they underestimated the chief instructor. The good-natured guy informed all his charges that they now needed to go to their tents, as breakfast was already being prepared, but one of the soldiers said that they were ordered to cook for themselves. This statement made the protagonist very angry, and he decided to sort out this whole situation. The guy asked all the soldiers if they really wanted to cook for themselves, and the soldiers agreed that they didn't like cooking and would happily eat food that was already prepared. After laughing, the other soldiers decided to ask Kurumi if he wouldn't go broke buying so much food, but there were a lot of resources on this island, and he could afford it. After some time, the events continued in the city's business center. The worried young man asked his friend if she was really going to leave. It turned out to be Fan Kai's mother, and she said that she was indeed going to leave because she no longer regretted losing the restaurant and was ready to start a new business. Resigned to the loss of such an employee, the boy said that he would come to terms with it. Kurumi also decided to treat her old friend and asked one of the restaurant workers to pour her some wine. Fan Kai and her friend were charmed by such generosity and said that they also drank wine. But the main character was against this, since the girls were only 17 years old and they could only drink juice. The next morning, events continued in an unknown house where the young man was. The guy woke up in the morning and couldn't believe that he was so drunk that he broke into someone else's house. Looking around, Kurumi couldn't figure out where he was. And looking at himself, the young man could not understand who he was with yesterday and what he did when he was drunk. A week after Fan Kai and her mother left, events on the island continued to unfold. The island also gained more workers, one of whom was a local hooligan and the other was a former Special Forces captain. The wards carried out absolutely all the commands that the main character gave them without any problems. At some point, the young man decided that he needed to go to the city to do something. The problem was that he needed to go to the city because he wanted to buy a car. The island workers immediately became thoughtful, as they did not understand how reasonable it was to buy a car if you lived on an island. But such thoughts from the staff did not suit Kurumi, and he said that hiring them was unreasonable, and buying a car was a completely reasonable purchase. Having ordered his charges to stop fooling around, the young man declared that they would immediately take the car away. A few hours later, the events continued in the city, namely at the International Automobile Exhibition, where all the cars were form-made. The main character could not understand how his employee knew so much about cars, but as it turned out, his girlfriend works as a model at this exhibition. Kurumi even thought that his protege was lying, since she didn't believe that he had a girlfriend, but the guy was actually telling the truth. Laughing at the suspicion of lying, the young man said that he would introduce him to his girlfriend later. As it turned out, the same girl that the employee had told us about earlier was nearby. This girl's name was YY, and Wenji had spoken about her before. Wenji suddenly saw that his girlfriend was upset during this meeting, and when he asked what was wrong, the girl said that she had been fired. Namely, the girl was fired by her manager because he invited her to dinner and she refused. This injustice made Kurumi very angry, and he wanted to talk to the manager to find out all the circumstances. The alarmed lady asked the gentleman not to do this, as he could only make the situation worse. After this, Vi decided to find out what kind of car this gentleman would like to buy. If the main character needs safety and power, then the girl advised him to take a closer look at this SUV. It has an excellent design and all the latest technologies. The car did look good, but the young man realized that it was too big for his sister, to whom he was going to give it. Suddenly, the girl standing nearby began to say that if Vi was so touchy, then it was completely incomprehensible why she communicated with such bores. At this point, the two guys realized that these scoundrels probably just came out of a plastic surgery clinic, and they also had ugly handbags. Another worker at the exhibition exclaimed that it was an international car brand, and she highly doubted that Kurumi would be able to afford it. This behavior made Wen-ji very angry, and he asked the girl to repeat what she had just said. The young man also heard the lady talking about how Vi had found herself a beggar who couldn't even buy such a car. Suddenly, the girl almost started crying, pretending that she was in pain from having her hand grabbed. Continuing to pretend, the impudent lady screamed, calling for someone from the crowd of people to help her. Suddenly, an elderly man ran up and wanted to know what had happened. It turned out that this elderly man had a rather young wife, and it was she who began to slander Vi. The insulted girl immediately rushed to her elderly man and told him that she had been insulted here. As it turned out, the same jewelry store owner was at this party, and he wanted to know what Kurumi was doing there. Feeling uncomfortable, the young man decided to greet his friend and asked if she was his wife. The gentleman also began to feel some uneasiness, since this girl was not quite his wife. In fact, this girl was an escort who had been previously hired by Mr. Nip. The old man came closer and saw that Kurumi was Mr. Nip's girlfriend and agreed to forget about the incident if the boy didn't apologize to his wife. But the main character was not at all happy with the fact that in this situation, he also had to apologize. Feeling very angry, the man shouted that in this case, he would no longer hold back and would use force. Mr. Nip did not defend his client and said he should not hold back, but would warn him if anything went wrong. As he was about to leave, the gentleman also said that he had changed his mind about signing a contract with the older man, and the escort came closer and said that she had also been yelled at. Looking at the girl, Nip ordered her to be quiet, since she was not his wife to give orders. All these events were quite funny for the young man, and the old man could not understand what kind of past this guy had, and why Nip himself wanted to be friends with him. After thinking about the situation for a while, the elderly man exclaimed that there was a misunderstanding between them. That's why he decided to just apologize to Kurumi and said that they should forget about this incident. The protagonist agreed with this statement and said that the man's manager fired his friend's girlfriend for no reason. And the lady sitting next to her also insulted V, who had recently been fired. That's why the young man believed that money can do anything, so he took out a bank card and said that there were $100 million on it. Thanks to this misunderstanding, he manages to use a bank card to transfer money to the killer and get rid of the scoundrel who dared to insult an innocent girl. Taking this insult, Jig's elderly husband immediately kicked the girl out, declaring that she was fired. Enraged, the man also told the scoundrel to tell the manager that he was also fired. Looking at everything that was happening, Wen-ji and his girlfriend were simply shocked because they thought that Kurumi was an ordinary businessman and sold fish. No one had noticed before that he was so cool. A few minutes later, the events continued on the road, where the main character and his company were already driving a new car. V was behind the wheel and was shocked that the gentleman allowed her to drive the car because she was afraid that she might crash it. The young man was not at all afraid that he could crash in this car, since Vi was driving. After all, for her, it was a short probationary period. The probationary period was necessary to become a driver for Ms. Fan Kai and her mother, as this way they could earn a salary and sometimes a bonus. The girl was sincerely grateful for such work, as she understood that it would be highly paid and prestigious. After some time, the main character appeared near the lady and told her that she would receive a certain gift. The pink-haired girl immediately thought that Kurumi was going to give her a gift from the girl who was nearby. However, the assumption was not entirely correct, since this girl's name was Vi, and she was supposed to be this lady's personal driver. At that moment, the lady thought that she didn't need a driver since she didn't even have a car. A happy wife said that Mr. Kurumi was also giving her a car, so that her future children would have something to drive. These words shocked absolutely everyone, because the guy was embarrassed to talk about the woman's children, and the woman was embarrassed because she was being given a car. The young man, embarrassed, nevertheless explained that in fact this lady was his business partner. Without showing it, Vi agreed, but everything was perfectly clear anyway. The hero also decided to warn the girl that he was taking Wen-ji away for a couple of days. For the girl, this was not a problem, since her boyfriend had nothing to do in this city anyway. The young man told the girl that he would miss him, but she did not react in any way and just continued to watch him. However, Wen-ji still wanted to know where the master was taking him, as it was completely unclear. In fact, the young man had a cunning plan that he wanted to put into action. As it turned out, the young man and his comrades were sailing to the Sea of Okhotsk. It was only October, and snow had already fallen. Immediately after their arrival, frost set in, making travel by sea incredibly difficult. The brave young man ordered his friends to get to work and haul in the nets. The fishing nets contained large quantities of sea fish, which could literally enrich them. But according to their friends, it seemed to them that they had swum for so long to get to this sea, but they only managed to catch some worthless fish. In fact, this fish was intended for something completely different. It was supposed to be used as food. Soon after, the young man ordered his comrade to prepare a crab trap. Carefully removing the heavy trap, Pen-Killif did everything possible not to drop it into the water. They lowered a crab trap, and everyone was curious to see what they would catch. As it turned out, they would catch Kamchatka crabs. Hearing this, the guys realized that in this way, they would definitely get rich. The king crab was better known as the king crab, and from the name it could be understood that this type of crab is highly prized in the market. The Kamchatka crab meat was really tender, and the taste was just amazing. Seeing that his employee was sleeping, the boss immediately ordered him to stop fooling around and get to work. After a few hours, a large number of crabs had been successfully caught and were already being cooked in a frying pan. Once cooked, the crabs have a really great flavor, which means you can eat a lot of them. After eating a little, Kurumi asked his staff to leave some of the crabs alive. Had to leave a few crabs to try to breed them on the island. Suddenly Pen said that a radiogram had arrived from scientists in the east. It said that they were in a research area and had to leave it immediately. This radiogram caused misunderstanding among the boys, since they were on the open sea. Using this place for personal purposes was a criminal offense, and something fishy was clearly going on here. With a heavy sigh, Kurumi told his men that they now needed to take care of the captured crabs. Looking at his friend, the comrade assumed that he was behaving very strangely, because he looked somehow sad. When asked about his health, the guy did not react in any way and told his workers to just do their jobs. A few minutes later, the main character went to the roof of the ship to do something unusual. The boy had an unusual technique that allowed him to use his ghost for personal purposes. Thanks to this unusual technique, the body could be left on the ship, but with the help of the ghost, it could be transported to any point in the world. The smart guy had an unusual plan, which he was going to implement in exactly this way. After quite a long time, the young man and his team found themselves in warmer climates, where it was no longer so cold. The comrade also woke up and decided to ask Kurumi why he got up so early, but he replied that he decided not to stop and bring more people to his island. After thinking for a while, the hero came to the conclusion that they would have to return to the Sea of Okhotsk again, but this time as a research vessel. The impressive journey continued, and the group of people again set off to the Sea of Okhotsk in search of adventure. As they approached the research vessel, the boys discovered that the researchers were catching sperm whales. This act was simply a violation of the law, since catching sperm whales was prohibited. These people had an international whale sanctuary in their country, and they did it in the name of science. But Kurumi realized that if he hadn't mastered dowsing, he would have missed the opportunity to take revenge on the villains. Wen-ji was also instructed to record everything that happened on video to provide evidence to the police. The video also shows what appears to be a research vessel catching a baby beluga whale, which is listed in the Red Book. A determined friend told Kurumi that he couldn't just stand there and watch what was happening here. The young man shouted that he would help in this situation in any case and save the baby beluga whale. These words made an impression on the guy, because he did not expect such courage from his comrade. The hero decided to dive underwater, and although the water was quite cold, he did it anyway. During the dive, Kurumi still managed to meet a dolphin, who also agreed to help him in this situation. Having handed the net to the dolphin, he began to gradually tighten it to help the young man. The smart animal did everything possible to save the baby beluga whale from imminent death. Wen-ji and Yin-man watched the entire incident and filmed everything with their phone camera to capture evidence of the crime. After boarding the ship, Kurumi and his men were deciding whether they had recorded everything on video, but Wen-ji stated that he still believed that these scoundrels needed to be punished somehow. According to the hero, this idea is really good, since poachers need to be punished. The boy laughed and exclaimed that now the most interesting part was about to begin, because the animals that had previously helped underwater had to do something that would make the poachers think about their actions. Revenge on the poachers began, and a large number of animals immediately rushed to the criminals' boat to take revenge on them. The frightened men did not understand what to do in this situation, since their actions had previously gone unpunished. Watching everything that was happening, Pan managed to see that their enemy's ship simply flew into pieces. This event made Yin Man incredibly happy, but the other guy still asked his boss if they would save people. In any case, according to the law, it was necessary to save these poachers. But if there are sperm whales nearby, the boys will have to get to another ship on their own. Although this act was not entirely legal, in fact, the hero did not violate anything at all, since these people cannot swim even 2 miles in the cold sea. Several hours later, the poachers still had not reached the ship and had probably already drowned at sea. The young man and his team decided to have lunch because they were very hungry. Having eaten deliciously, the boys thought that the poachers would probably now want to warm up on the warm ship. Suddenly, the young man noticed that Kurumi was holding a very strange knife in his hands and decided to ask him where he got it from. It turned out that the young man found this knife on the ocean floor, as well as several other interesting things. One of the items found was an antique bow that was over 100 years old. Suddenly, one of the criminals began knocking on the window, attracting attention to himself so that he would be let in to warm up. But no one could understand why these scoundrels were shouting so much. Yin Man even said not to pay attention to them. At the same time, Pan noticed that they had received a message from the Coast Guard. It turned out that the Coast Guard had invited them to their city to share supplies and host the poachers. Yin Man decided to invite Wenji to post a video of the poachers breaking the law online to tell the world what was happening in this sea. After all, thanks to this video, it will be possible to scare absolutely all poachers in the world so that they do not break the law in the future. Hearing this, the villains immediately panicked, as they understood that in this way their destinies would be destroyed. A few hours later, the guys were already in warmer climates and were examining the criminals, who had suffered greatly from a cold. Looking up at the sky, Wenji discovered something unusual that he had never expected. It turned out that the helicopters began to fly very close to the ship, and a giant ship sailed even closer. Feeling dissatisfied, Pan realized that these were the Coast Guards, and they were very annoying because they were often bribed. That's why the Coast Guard confused the boys, because they thought the poachers were in cahoots with them. One of the poachers started screaming and laughing because he realized that he would go unpunished. The arrogant scoundrel insisted that if Kurumi and his team would kneel and apologize, their prison sentence would be reduced. The whole team was alarmed by what was happening and did not understand how to proceed further in this situation. Only the main character could resolve this conflict and do everything possible to avoid ending up in prison. The giant ship had already approached the Kurumi team's ship. A large number of people dressed as officials began to board the ship. According to the young man and his comrades, things were bad for them, as the people in front of them looked like some kind of diplomats. During this time, Kurumi tried to remain calm and told the entire team not to worry as nothing bad would happen. Suddenly, people in formal attire bowed to the master, as if expressing their respect to him, and the man decided to greet Kurumi and introduce himself. His name is Sun Jianyo, and he is a representative of the General Council of China. A Coast Guard captain and a major from a nearby town arrived with him. With the help of the video that was posted on the internet, Kurumi literally became popular, as the video showed how the sailors were being rescued, and now Kurumi was simply the pride of China. That is why the mayor of the nearest town suggested making the main character an honorary citizen, and he will be able to come to their city at any time. The young man became worried, realizing that the situation had gotten out of control and that he had been completely misunderstood. Now the guy who wanted to teach poachers a lesson has literally become a national hero in China. Kurumi became a virtual tourist attraction in China, and many reporters began interviewing him. After a few hours, all the interviews were finally over, and the guy was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Yin Man decided to turn to his comrade and still wanted to find out something. The friend was incredibly interested in what the Chinese authorities would do if they found out that they had sunk this ship. A few more days passed, and the travelers again found themselves on the ship and sailing in an unknown direction. A bluefin tuna was swimming nearby, beckoning them to catch it and eat it. But everyone on the ship understood that the tuna was too fast, and it was literally impossible to catch it. Even the main character realized that he couldn't catch the tuna while in the water. Suddenly, a baby white whale emerged nearby and seemed to want to say something. Looking at this sea creature, Kurumi immediately realized that this was the same whale calf that they had saved earlier. Meanwhile, events were taking place in the capital of the eastern part of the country, where there was a large concentration of political power. Some politicians were simply shocked by the discoveries made at sea. In a video posted online, officials discovered some artifacts called the Kiku Monogatari and Yusuji Yumi. This greatly angered the officials as they realized that these items were the lost treasures of their country. The most angry of all was the unknown man, who ordered his wards to find this guy who was able to find such rare artifacts. On her way back home, Kurumi controlled the minds of white sharks, bluefin tunas, and other fish. Thanks to his magical abilities, the young man made a good catch. Now, there should be even more fish on their island. This fish was simply magnificent, but sometimes the guy thought that perhaps the sharks could eat other, more friendly inhabitants of the ocean. A week later, the city hosted the opening ceremony of the Four Seas Fishing Company. Fan Kai learned that his uncle had finally returned to the city and was very happy about it. The curious girl decided to ask her uncle if he enjoyed the trip. In fact, this made the guy very angry because he wanted to know who told her that they were going on a trip. Fan Kai's mother was also there, and she was very happy that the young man was able to come to the opening of the company. To everyone's surprise, the lady managed to open her own company in such a short time, and Kurumi decided to give her a small gift. The woman was a little embarrassed by this, and she immediately blushed because she did not understand why these formalities in the form of gifts were necessary, because they were almost like family. These words confused the guy a little, as he did not understand in what sense they were family. But the protagonist's friends immediately understood what was happening and what exactly the expression about family meant. Suddenly, a man with a threatening look appeared, and he immediately turned to Madame Fan. At first glance, the men who came to the opening of the company looked like some kind of bandits, but they decided to congratulate the woman on the opening. Such guests confused Kurumi, and he immediately decided to find out from the men who they were and what they were doing there. The man was called Crazy with a threatening look, and he immediately wanted to discuss the rules for opening this company. Not understanding what was going on, the young man immediately decided to ask what rules were being discussed, but the man was very angry, and he thought that his interlocutor was escalating the situation. Suddenly, the woman handed an envelope to a man named Lin and apologized for disturbing him. There was money in the envelope, and she asked Lin to leave because they were going to talk about all the upcoming business later. The villain also exclaimed that he remembered Kurumi, and next time he would not tolerate such antics. Watching everything that was happening, Yin Man was already prepared for battle and decided to ask his comrade if he could help him resolve this conflict. But the young man was determined and said that he could handle everything himself. At that very second, the woman decided to stop him and asked him not to do anything. Again, lady, his reputation means a lot to him, but having problems on the day of the company's opening is a bad omen. In this regard, Mrs. Fan told Kurumi that on this important day for her, it would be better for them to be together. This statement confused the guy, and he agreed with the woman, saying that in that case he would deal with the scoundrel tomorrow. The happy woman was grateful to her friend for listening to her. Looking at everything that was happening, the comrades saw how Kurumi was literally shining with happiness, and they almost went blind from this. Meanwhile, Lin thought that this young guy did not know how to behave, and he wanted to show him what good manners were. Sometime later, at one of the events, the bandits found out that Kurumi actually had good connections with many influential people and immediately began to think that perhaps it would be better to leave him. The arrogant boss thought that they were just ordinary businessmen and couldn't even be considered human. Suddenly, the event participants heard Major Chun Pinghai congratulating Kurumi on the opening of the store, which immediately left them in shock. The mayor of the region also decided to congratulate the lady and the main character on the opening of a new business, and the North Sea Commissioner hastened to congratulate everyone. Suddenly, someone decided to approach the villains because he wanted to talk to them. It turned out that it was Yin Man. He was very angry at the bandits and wanted to discuss with them the conflict that had arisen not long ago. The bandits' protege shouted that all the local influential people had really gathered there, but the man continued to convince him that there was no need to panic. Thus, a conversation began between Kurumi and the bully, and now they needed to discuss the rules. As soon as the conversation began, the bandit immediately began to apologize for this misunderstanding. The young man did not want to forgive such an impudent person at all and said that no one dares to treat ladies like that. The impudent fellow literally began to beg to let him go, but the main character was not going to hold him back by force. But in return, the bandit had to go to the city mayor himself and tell him everything. The frightened scoundrel realized that they wanted to teach him a lesson in this way, but he did not even believe that he deserved such a severe punishment. Lon felt that this punishment was too harsh, and he would rather fight the guy and win the battle than go to the mayor and talk about the crimes. As soon as the criminal began to swing his fist to strike, he was immediately stopped by his charges. Coming closer, Kurumi began to convince the bandit that he shouldn't panic, as it was just a dislocated arm. The young man even began to communicate quite politely with the man, and he immediately calmed down, because he thought that he was safe. At that very moment, the boy exclaimed that he would not tolerate this scoundrel being near him and being his enemy. The distraught man began to scream in fear, as he understood that this way he would simply be sent to prison. The main character didn't care at all, as he wanted to achieve justice and was going to put the scoundrel behind bars. Feeling very afraid, the criminal began to shout for no one to come near him. Looking at everything that was happening, Yin Man and Wen Ji realized that their boss was simply the incarnation of the devil, because the boss not only mocked the criminal, but also humiliated him in front of a large number of people. But according to one of her friends, this was not the worst outcome, as Kurumi could have been even more cruel. A few days later, the events continued again on the big ship, the owner of which was a young man. The major and the mayor eventually visited the guy and decided to find out what Kurumi learned during his trip, and he said that he had a business plan. The influential person immediately began to listen to his interlocutor because he was interested in what kind of business plan he was talking about. So, the guy decided that coastal fishing was detrimental to the overall health of the reservoir, and he wanted to build a marine reserve. This caused great concern among the men, as if fishing was banned, the economy of their town would suffer. The plan was a little different. They wanted to create a sanctuary where people could watch whales. If the first such reserve is built in China, there will be no end of tourists. While pondering this business plan, the mayor still had no idea where to get the whales. The good-natured boy said that his uncle should not worry, because with his help he would find the whales. After drinking another glass of alcohol, the mayor exclaimed that the Minister of Foreign Affairs himself wanted to meet with Kurumi. This statement surprised the boy, as he did not understand why he needed to meet with representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The major decided to tell him that it concerned the two national treasures that he had recently found in the East. Reflecting on these finds, the young man could not even imagine that some strange knife and shooting bow were a national treasure. The director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is also the vice mayor of the city, so Uncle doesn't want him to get into trouble. Hearing about this problem, Kurumi immediately agreed and said that for his uncle's sake, he would go to meet with the ex-mayor. A few hours later, young man decided to ask his comrade if they were returning to the island, but Kurumi said that they had to go to the city tomorrow because they had a business meeting planned. For the comrade, this news was simply excellent, and he was glad that they were sailing to the city. One smart friend said that he wanted to show her an unusual place that would simply shock Kurumi. This place was really unusual because there were parties going on there all the time. The main character really didn't like such places, and he felt quite awkward. There were also girls at the disco who asked a group of guys if they wanted to have a drink with them. Comrade Kurumi was simply incredibly happy that he would be able to chat with girls, as well as drink a large amount of champagne. Then the girls started discussing among themselves how this guy could buy a whole tower of champagne. That's why the interlocutor found Yin Man incredibly generous and wanted to continue communicating with him. One of the girls tried to talk to the main character and decided to ask his name, but he remained silent. Young Man tried his best to convince his friend to spend time together, but Kurumi went along with him for company and had no intention of doing anything other than sitting next to him. There were some strange guys sitting at the next table, and one of them was incredibly angry. The rich guy was very angry at the country bumpkin who was sitting next to him and drinking champagne in one gulp. The arrogant young man was very interested in who this guy was who drank so much and also attracted the attention of beautiful girls. The angry guy's name was Master Go, and his company wanted to show who was boss in this place. Slightly drunk, young man noticed that a group of people sitting nearby were staring at them. The smart young man immediately realized that the company nearby was looking for trouble, and he was simply bored. The same scoundrels came closer and immediately addressed Kurumi, but were very impolite. The rich man's wards said that Master Go wanted to meet Kurumi, but the main character did not want to meet the losers and told them to leave while they could, since he was not interested in their childish games. The impudent behavior of the young people greatly embarrassed the impudent people, and they immediately wanted to fight. Suddenly, Master Go told his charges that there was no point in escalating the conflict and that they should leave. In fact, the rich man believed that the time for a fight had not yet come, and he would still take revenge on Kurumi for her rudeness. Sitting next to the girls, Yin Man realized that what had approached them was just a bunch of kids who imagined themselves to be gangsters. At the same time, Kurumi noticed that those gangsters were trying to block the exit, and he was about to go and check, but Ian immediately shouted that he was the one who should go and see what happened there. This caused misunderstanding in the protagonist, as he thought that his friend did not like his company in the form of two girls. The ladies also began to convince the guy that he was really strong, but there were too many enemies, so he would have to stay here. With a heavy sigh, the young man resigned himself to this fate and continued to sit in the pleasant company of girls. Starting to cry, young man shouted that if Kurumi went there himself, the girls would clean up that club themselves in the middle of the night. At first, my friend had a misunderstanding and didn't understand what all this cleaning had to do with it. But then everything became crystal clear as a large amount of furniture and expensive alcohol was destroyed during the fight. The bandits began to panic, and Master Go didn't know what to do in this situation, although he still wanted to take revenge on Kurumi. The girls near Yin Man couldn't calm down and continued to order large portions of drinks. After the fight with the bad guys, Yin Man's company began to take care of him, and two girls even wanted to take them home. Looking around, the young man and his friend noticed that there was an unfriendly guy nearby. As it turned out, Master Go arrived with an unknown man who stated that a group of guys were arrested for attacking a person. The young man had a misunderstanding, since he had also called the police earlier. Pointing a finger at the enemies, Kurumi said that they were also suspected of creating an organized crime group and attacking people, with Master Go being their leader. The policeman still didn't believe the guy and said that he would be arrested anyway. Then the main character began to talk about how he is an officer and instructor of the Northern Fleet, who they now want to arrest. The alarmed man could not believe these words, as he did not expect that such an influential person would be at the disco. Having obtained the documents, Kurumi decided to prove that he really was an officer. After examining the documents, the police indeed discovered that Kurumi was a reserve officer. The man laughed and shouted that forgery of documents is a much more serious crime. The policeman's hand immediately reached for the holster where his service pistol was located. The brazen policeman pulled out a gun and ordered the group of guys not to make any sudden movements. Looking at this corrupt policeman, the young man realized that a good fight was about to start. With a sinister smile, Kurumi decided to ask the corrupt cop if he was really going to shoot. Suddenly the bandit snatched the pistol that was in the policeman's hands. Although in reality, this whole situation was rather awkward, since the master was still just a child, but he had already grabbed a gun and started threatening someone. The main character immediately began to take something out of his pocket in order to use it to his advantage. It was the same gun that Kurumi pointed straight at his opponent's forehead. Putting away his gun, the young man said that he would not dirty his hands for such an impudent fellow as Master Go. Starting to laugh, Kurumi asked his friend to remove the evidence as it could be used against them. Meanwhile, the police officer was shaking with fear as the firearm was confiscated due to illegal use. All this time, the worried man thought his career was over. A few minutes later, the regular police arrived and promised to deal with the matter together with Officer Kurumi. The friend was very upset because he thought that they couldn't even communicate normally with girls and have fun. The club administrator spoke to his protege and said that it was necessary to hang pictures of Yin Man and Kurumi on their wall, since it was better not to have problems with these guys. A few days later, the event continued at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where Master Mickey, the Eastern ambassador, sat not far from Kurumi, hoping that their national treasure would be returned. Looking at the minister, the young man decided to ask him who he was to give him orders, but then the authorities announced that they would pay him compensation in the amount of $100 million. The compensation was quite generous, but in this case, Kurumi decided to ask the minister if he would sell the treasure himself for that kind of money. These words caused strong aggression in the minister, and he did not understand why this guy was talking to him like that. Mr. Mickey is a very important person, and besides, his son still hasn't taken revenge on Kurumi for yesterday. Thus, the main character realized that in front of him stood the father of the scoundrel whom he had humiliated yesterday. Suddenly, a man entered the office and asked if Kintaro Hori from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was there. I don't understand what's going on. Kintaro decided to ask who this guy was and became interested in his personality. It turns out that a disciplinary advisor entered the office, and now Kintaro Hori is suspected of bribery and is under investigation, so he needs to be interrogated. This information literally sent shivers down the man's spine, and he didn't understand what to do in this situation. Due to the events that were happening, Kurumi realized that the father was not much different from his son. So the show was over and the protagonist was about to leave the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Suddenly, the second officer stopped the guy and decided to find out under what conditions he would agree to exchange their national treasure. Looking at the man, the young man immediately thought about what he would receive in return for such an expensive find. Suddenly, Kurumi exclaimed that she wanted to obtain a treasure called the Jitan Loot. He also needs to obtain a second treasure called the King's Golden Scroll. And the third treasure is called the Sitting Statue. These treasures were on this land, so Kurumi is willing to exchange them for his findings. The MFA employee was simply shocked. He saw that the gentleman really had good requests. As he left, the boy said that the ministry would still have time to think about it, but now he was saying goodbye to them. Several days passed after this incident, and events on the island continued to occur. For some unknown reason, the major was incredibly angry as he watched his soldiers. Watching his uncle, the young man did not understand at all what was happening, because he saw that he was very angry. Uncle sighed heavily and wanted to say something, but at first he only said that it was good that Kurumi came. The soldier was incredibly angry because he did not understand why his soldiers were so skinny when they needed muscles to compete. Laughing, the main character said that now he would try to explain absolutely everything. Without listening to the explanations, the major ordered the soldiers to tell what happened to them and how the instructor trained them. The soldiers looked at each other and told how one day the instructor sent them into the forest to hunt a boar. The man didn't like this at all and thanked the young man for trying to kill his soldiers, but he just wanted to spice up the program. The soldiers, blushing slightly, exclaimed that this training had improved their physical fitness and immediately thanked the instructor for it. But this was truly unusual, as even Kurumi was surprised by such gratitude. The happy soldiers said that they had been running away from the boar for a very long time, so now they have no problems with running, and their strength and agility have also increased significantly. All this time, the young man believed that the soldiers were simply blatantly lying, trying to justify the actions of the instructor. Absolutely, all the soldiers began to thank the instructor for his hard work, because they were sincerely grateful to him. In my uncle's opinion, this was a truly excellent result, as he did not expect that such a young and inexperienced instructor would be able to achieve such success. The protagonist's comrade immediately decided to ask the guy if it was true or if the soldiers were grateful, but Kurumi only asked him to keep quiet, saying that everything was under control. At that very moment, the boy's phone rang, and he realized that this call could be important. Taking the phone, the young man received a call from Mickey and said that he had already laid out his conditions, not understanding why they were calling. As it turned out, the partners called because they agreed to the main character's terms. The authorities also said that they were ready to exchange the treasures, and for the guy this news was incredibly joyful. Even the major heard that people from the East are already ready for barter. This event also justified this man in many ways, as he was glad that the return of the treasures to his homeland would be a great event. A moment later, the man was already quite serious and told the boy that an important event would soon happen. The young man began to get nervous because of his interlocutor, as he saw how quickly his mood changed. Waving his arms, the soldier said that the boys needed to dress appropriately, as they were dressed like homeless people. Kurumi immediately became offended, as he thought he looked pretty good, and his comrades even cried, as they didn't expect them to look like homeless people. Sometime later, events in the big city continued. An expensive car pulled up to an unknown building, which probably contained a group of incredibly handsome men. It was really so. Two nice guys with simply wonderful appearance immediately got out of the car. Looking at her friend, the girl was simply shocked because she did not expect that this suit would suit her uncle so well. Laughing, the lady also added that Brother Man still looks like a bandit. The young man did not expect to hear something like that at all, as he thought he would look like a gentleman. Meng immediately got angry and started shouting that the girl was wrong, and then the friend admitted that Brother Meng was also very handsome, and she was just joking. While the dialogue between the friends continued, the young man began to analyze the situation. Looking around, Kurumi discovered that there was a large number of police in the place they had arrived at. And it is completely unclear why there are so many police officers here, because no one warned that they would arrive in such numbers. After thinking a little, the hero came to the conclusion that he needed to be careful in this place, since it was unknown what awaited them next. A few hours later, the ceremony of exchanging artifacts began. The guy was given the artifacts in a beautiful red box. After the inspection, the exchange was supposed to begin. The first relic was the Hunan landscape, a favorite painting of the Qianlong Emperor and the first painting of the Southern Song dynasty. The next thing that could be seen from afar was an obsidian Timiku tea bowl. The third artifact is a 5-stringed lute, a symbol of the Eastern imperial family, which was passed down from generation to generation. Looking at all the family heirlooms, Kurumi realized that they now belonged to him. Suddenly, the hero began to play the artifact given to him. This caused incredible shock among everyone present at the event, as no one expected anything like this. As if nothing had happened, Kurumi continued to play the incredibly expensive musical instrument. The comrades were worried about this event and did not understand when Kurumi had learned to play the lute. Meanwhile, someone nearby started clapping and shouting bravo. Looking at the applauding man, the boy immediately decided to find out who it was. One of the service employees stated that it was their deputy chairman, Sums from China, and there was no need to create a conflict based on applause after the speech. The good-natured man exclaimed that it was really great that young people were working for the good of their country and not for personal gain. Bowing his head, the hero immediately greeted the deputy chairman and still wanted to know why he was only talking about his personal good. Soon after, the men decided to say hello and shook hands. Looking at the chairman, the boy realized that something was wrong. Realizing that some problems might arise during the exchange, the young man immediately decided to ask the deputy if everything was okay. Looking at his interlocutor, the chairman could not understand what was going on and why the guy asked this question. As it turned out, Kurumi was just nervous, and due to his excitement, he refused the question, but then said that everything was fine. The hero decided to tell himself a little and explained that he knew a little about medicine, and the chairman's pulse could indicate that he had a pancreatic disease, so he advised him to visit the hospital as soon as possible. These words really surprised the chairman, and he realized that Kurumi was indeed a real talent, but he also wanted to know what this guy was going to do with the treasure. Hearing this question, the boy realized that he needed to appear peaceful, but he only came here to take the treasures, not to talk to anyone else. Suddenly, someone from the outside exclaimed that such treasures should belong to the nation, because the interests of the nation are above personal interests. The man turned out to be the vice mayor of Qingdao, named Li Wei. The vice mayor had selfish motives and thought that if he sorted out this situation, the deputy chairman would immediately promote him. Upon seeing this man, the young man immediately realized that this was the same man who had asked the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to find him, and he thought that this man was on Dongguk Island and wanted the treasure to be returned. Journalists were immediately shocked by this statement, as it was a sensational statement that the deputy mayor was indeed involved in this matter. Sensing danger, the man immediately exclaimed that this was complete nonsense and he would sue for slander. The young man didn't really object, as he understood that in this way the commission would find out the truth about this man. All this time the deputy watched the guy and stood silently nearby. Realizing his guilt, Kurumi explained to his viceroy that he would gladly give the treasures to his country, but he was upset by such rulers of power who were trying to get to the top by any means necessary. The events were indeed dramatic. Meng and Fan Kai watched everything that was happening and were simply shocked. Still smiling, Deputy Song told the boy that he knew what he was going through, but the entire organization should not be judged by people like him. Thus, the influential person promised that they would definitely deal with the vice mayor and his friends. This turn of events caused the vice mayor to fall to the floor, as he was so powerless he could no longer stand on his feet. Journalists were shocked because they saw that a couple of phrases from the vice mayor were enough to almost get him fired. According to the reporters, Kurumi was simply a monster incarnate, dispensing justice. A few hours later, events continued in a park near the city. The protagonist's friend decided to ask him how the whole event went. I sighed heavily. The young man said that he returned to his deputy covered in blood, and the major immediately thought it was a joke. Laughing, Kurumi said that it was indeed a joke because he had leased the treasures to the National Museum and received money for it. Thus, the major understood why his interlocutor was so happy. After all, if he had given himself up to the treasure, he would have been very sad. The joyful man informed the captain that for the return of the national treasure the country had decided to reward him with his own ship. This news was impressive because the guy would never have believed that the state had decided to thank him. The hero immediately wanted to know where his ship was, but the major explained that first he needed to help his country one more time, and then he could capture it. Having realized everything that was happening, the boy already understood that everything would not be as simple as he thought. After some time, the plane began to fly in an unknown direction. Looking out the window, the main character tried to understand where he had been flying all this time. Looking at the stewardess, men immediately realized that there were many beauties in Uzbekistan, and he would like to go there as soon as possible. As it turned out, the boy was abroad for the first time and did not know what it was like to live in other countries. 2 weeks before the flight, very unusual events took place, in which Uncle took part. The military major gave Kurumi and his comrade passports, cash, and identification cards. The government was supposed to give this guy a ship, but it's in another country, so it needs to be returned. They also found a translator for the young man, with whose help he will be able to communicate with residents of another country. After thinking for a bit, the guy realized that the Chinese authorities would not be able to do this on their own. The major sighed heavily and said that he was glad that Kurumi realized this herself. Now the young man faced a task. He had to return the ship under the guise of a private fisherman, and his trip had to be strictly confidential. This unusual task immediately caused concern, but Kurumi realized that there was no way out of this situation. Returning to the events that are happening now, someone started calling out for Captain Kurumi. This man turned out to be Yaksen Min, who exclaimed that the deal with Uzbekistan would take place tomorrow, and today they could rest and go to the center. The man was only happy about this turn of events because he wanted to be in the center of Uzbekistan to see how many beauties there were in this city. The hero was not interested at all, and he said that he would not go, as he just wanted to walk around the hotel. According to the comrade, his friend was a bore, and it was quite boring to communicate with him. Arriving in Uzbekistan, Kurumi found himself in one of the local stores, where he examined the food products on sale. Some of the dishes looked incredibly appetizing, and the guy immediately had a desire to buy them. The young man had already bought himself some sausage to eat when suddenly someone nearby started shouting. The man who was screaming turned out to be the same man who caught the thief and immediately hit her on the back. The girl stole some food, and when she was hit, she fell to the floor. The disgruntled man continued to shout that the girl had stolen his food. Feeling displeased, the lady exclaimed that she had not stolen anything, but that her payment had simply not gone through. The man realized that the thief was lying, since she had previously been unable to pay even for the broken shelf. The shop owner grabbed the stranger by the hair and wanted to teach her good manners. In desperation, the lady immediately dropped the bag she had previously stolen from the store. 2 small children watched the whole thing and felt very sorry that the woman was being beaten. The children watching the whole thing looked incredibly pathetic, as if the food had been stolen especially for them. Looking at the children, the girl told them to be quiet and not to say anything because she would be fine. At that very second, someone decided to stand up for the girl and grab the man by the hand. This person turned out to be the main character, who told the man that it was just bread and he shouldn't do this to the girl because of her. Kurumi also realized that the stranger owed the shop owner money and decided to pay much more for the bread so that he would leave the thief behind. Grabbing the girl's hand, the young man now wanted to do something for her. The determined guy exclaimed that they needed to go somewhere. The agitated blonde did not understand at all what was happening and thought that something terrible might happen to her. A few minutes later, events continued at the checkpoint, not far from the store. While talking to the girl, Kurumi was very surprised that the thief knew Chinese. Then the girl decided to tell her that she spent 3 whole years in China, and those were the 3 years of her best life. Not understanding what was going on, the boy asked in that case what happened to the girl and assumed that she was ill. Bowing her head, the woman said that she was indeed ill and had recently been diagnosed with drowsiness. This diagnosis left Kurumi confused, as the woman in front of him spoke very calmly about such a serious illness. Turning away, the stranger also added that there were many sick people in their city. Looking around, one could see that after the war, complete chaos reigned in Uzbekistan, and the people in this country did everything they could to survive. As soon as several men approached the two interlocutors, the stranger immediately began to push Kurumi away so that he would run away from here. An unknown man approached the girl, immediately hit her in the face with his hand, and said that she should run away. The blonde felt guilty and agreed with the gentleman. The impudent stranger also stated that Kurumi now owed them $500,000 for complicity in a crime. And if $500,000 is not given now, then a terrible fate awaits the main character. Suddenly, a fist hits the villain right in the face. Experiencing severe pain, the impudent man was in complete shock as he did not understand what had just happened. After the first blow, a fight began in which it was obvious that Kurumi would easily win. And so it happened. Without receiving a single scratch, the main character easily defeated absolutely all the bandits. Sensing danger, the damn blonde said that these people were skinheads and would not let them go just like that. In fact, Kurumi didn't care at all who the men were, and said that the stranger should come with him so that he could help her heal. Not understanding what was happening, the woman thought it was some kind of joke and had no intention of going with the stranger. Smiling, the young man explained that since his interlocutor was in China, she should know about their traditional medicine. Several hours later, the events in the hotel room continued. The healing process began with Kurumi helping a stranger she found on the street. The woman felt a great sense of relief and realized that Chinese medicine was truly miraculous. Feeling very weak, the blonde began to fall to the floor and lost consciousness. Fearing the consequences of such a fall, the hero immediately began to save the girl. Meanwhile, someone began to enter the room and gradually opened the door. It was Comrade Min who told his friend that he had brought him food so that he would not say that the fun was going on without him. Looking at the scene in this room, Meng didn't know how to react to it because he saw Kurumi holding a stranger in her arms who was wearing only a towel. Realizing what was going on here, the comrade was very happy for his friend because he thought he had found himself a girlfriend. It was absolutely clear to the main character that he would not be able to explain anything to Minyu, since he already understood everything. The next day, events continued on the embankment, not far from the pier. Looking at his friend, Meng claimed that he was very lucky, but Kurumi only said that he was just helping a girl. Continuing to laugh at his friend, the young man said that he still wouldn't tell his friend's sister, who had previously been given a car. Suddenly, a strange man approached Captain Chopper and immediately wished him good health. This man turned out to be Colonel Ezekiel. Captain Chopper had to take away a huge warship called Vladimir, which embodied the best Ukrainian shipbuilding technologies. According to the guys, the ship was truly impressive, and they couldn't even believe that the government would just give it to them. Sensing a catch, Kurumi sincerely hoped that everything would happen as Uncle Ling said, because giving such a gift just like that seemed suspicious. Feeling uneasy, the hero decided to ask the colonel if they could sail away, but he said that it was not that easy. First, the colonel told the boys that they needed to go with him. As it turned out, they were heading to a military base where there were soldiers with weapons. Upon seeing the military base, the young man immediately realized that there were fighter jets there, as well as a large number of soldiers. The guide explained to the worried guy that everything was correct. Now he knew why they had to sail under the guise of a fisherman. Since this ship cannot cross borders, it had to pass through the Eurasian Straits. Having burst into tears, the main character realized that the old man had simply brazenly set him up. On this ship, the two guys were to sail across Europe and Asia, and Maine thought only of how much he wanted to look at the Spanish girls. At that very moment, someone shouted at the narrow-eyed people to leave the room. It turned out that these were the same men whom the main character had previously beaten. So the colonel saw that they were skinheads and realized that Captain Chopper was somehow connected to them. Bowing his head, the young man stated that he had no connection with skinheads. That's why Ezekiel said not to worry, because the captain is untouchable here. There were a lot of special forces guys in this room, so there won't be any problems with skinheads. The boy smiled and said that in this case he didn't need help, because the captain himself wants to deal with all the skinheads who attack him. For the skinheads, this was a real surprise, because they did not expect that one man would fight with everyone. The worried lieutenant colonel did not understand why the captain made such a decision, since there were more than 10 villains who wanted revenge. Walking closer to Ezekiel, Manhwa explained that there was nothing to worry about, as it was no problem for the captain. After all, if someone tries to take revenge on such a person, then at best, this poor fellow will end up in intensive care. And in the worst case, anyone who wants to defeat Kurumi will end up in the grave. After the incident with the skinheads, events on the ship continued to occur. The blonde was unhappy and insisted that she did not want to return to her homeland. The young man did not understand what was going on because he had cured her, and now she could continue to live in Uzbekistan in peace. He turned his head. The stranger did not want to come back, and saw that Kurumi did not want to take her with her either. The girl had a gun with her, and suddenly she started to take it out. Feeling very anxious, Gina began to scream that in that case it would be best to shoot her, because she would never return to her homeland. Even the comrade told his friend that he saved her, and if they returned to their homeland again, they would simply sign their own death warrant. Not knowing what to do in this situation, Kurumi decided to ask her friend what to do, to which he only responded that he should take them with him. The enterprising young man said that if he had already started helping the girl, then he had to see it through to the end. After some thought, Kurumi finally decided to do it, and said that he would take the girl and her children with him to China. Gina was very grateful to her savior, and said that she knew that Kurumi was the best guy in the world. The children also began to hug the boy, because they were sincerely grateful to him, since he was their savior. The joyful comrade decided to ask his friend what he would do upon arrival. The young man came to the conclusion that it was necessary to open a charitable foundation that would help children from poor cities. This ship will be able to carry a large cargo, so another 10 million can be invested in it. But Maine did not react to these words, because he saw that they had already sailed to Greece. There were many long-legged and tan girls in this country, who were impossible to resist. After getting off the ship, Man told his friend that he could do whatever he wanted, but he would go looking for girls from Greece. This situation was quite funny for Kurumi because he saw how worried his comrade was. Further events continued in Greece, namely on a beautiful beach. Closing his eyes, the boy began to think that, after all, rest wouldn't hurt him either. Looking at the girls on the beach, the young man admitted that they looked simply magnificent. One of the girls even smiled at Kurumi, and for him it was a sign, because he realized that he liked the stranger. Suddenly the woman took out some kind of sheet and tried to cover the main character with it. There were only the two of them left behind some blanket, and the stranger was about to kiss Kurumi. At that moment, several men who looked like bodyguard were looking for the girl. I watched the unfamiliar men. The girl was afraid of them, and it seemed that she was deliberately hiding from the mercenaries. The main character was simply shocked by such events, because he thought that it was a dream, and he himself ended up in it by accident. The stranger also had a simultaneous translator, which she inserted directly into Kurumi's ear. A little embarrassed, the gray-haired lady decided to ask the guy if he could help her. Feeling dissatisfied, the young man began to ask the lady what she wanted from him, and the interlocutor was surprised that he did not know her. Not understanding what was going on, Kurumi only said that he was new to this country and didn't know who this girl was. Smiling, the lady said that so be it, she would leave. But, looking around, the woman discovered that the mercenaries were still somewhere nearby. Coming closer to the main character, the stranger said that now she would be able to kiss Kurumi. The boy immediately blushed, as he did not expect that the kiss with the mysterious lady would happen exactly like this. After thinking for a while, the young man agreed and decided that this kiss would not harm him. After this incident, Meng decided to ask the guy if he really made up this whole story. This story simply could not have been made up, since the main character even had a photo of the very girl who kissed him. Looking at this photo, the men immediately realized that the girl was truly incredibly beautiful. Looking at the girl in the photograph, Gina was simply shocked because she recognized her. This girl's name was Julia. She had the title of Miss Universe and was the most beautiful star of Greece, as well as the conqueror of the hearts of millions. Now Kurumi felt very awkward because he realized that he was taken advantage of by the most beautiful girl in the world, and the man started crying because it was not him who was kissed by Miss Universe. Later, Kurumi and the others became friends with the ship's captain. The main character then joined the fleet for a while to protect the islands from pirates. During his service in the Navy, other ships often contacted the hero's headquarters. The translator was very worried about the last conversation, as the Eastern Fleet constantly teased them and asked for money for protection. The captain was constantly in conflict with them, and Kurumi began to realize that these bastards looked down on them. But still, the young man understood that the Eastern Fleet was now transporting cargo, and they could be forgotten, but it was better not to catch their eye. A few minutes later, the ship's captain looked through binoculars to scout out the situation. And in order to more effectively explore the situation, the guy used the mind-splitting technique, and his spirit began to travel around the territory. Sometime later, the spirit noticed a ship that was very close. Thus, the ship's captain realized that it was a pirate ship, but it was completely unclear what they were doing there. Grabbing the radio, the guy decided to warn his team about the discovery of an unidentified vessel, so he suggested changing course. The Western Fleet immediately began to laugh at the Chinese, saying that this small Chinese ship was just a joke, and if it was a Chinese ship, they would not be pleased. The determined young man exclaimed that he would change course anyway, despite the fact that his colleagues were against it. Even humans understood that these pirates would not be able to handle a large number of ships, as they were trained to fight warships. A few hours later, two ships collided, and someone literally begged Kurumi to protect their ship. Not understanding what was happening, the main character tried to find out the situation using the radio. Realizing that his ship could be in danger, the boy shouted to the crew to keep their weapons at the ready and be ready to fight off the pirates. Many of the sailors were ready to fight the enemies because Kurumi himself had prepared them for it. Comrade Men had a top-secret weapon with which he could fight off large numbers of enemies quite effectively. This weapon was called an RPG because it could fire rockets. A giant missile was fired straight at the pirate ship, and now it seemed the enemies had no more chances. In a few seconds, the missile was supposed to hit the ship directly. After the hit, there was an explosion of incredible force, and because of the fire, it was not clear whether the ship was destroyed. All the crew members were very happy about this fight, because thanks to the weapons that the lieutenant colonel gave them, they were able to win the fight. The pirates immediately realized that it would be difficult to fight such strong opponents, and immediately began to sail away. The men immediately turned to the protagonist to say that they were safe and could sail on. Hearing this, the young man immediately realized that he had an unusual idea. The idea was that they could walk right up to the pirates and attack them. To make the attack as effective as possible, several more missiles were used. There were 3 explosions at once, as all the missiles hit their target. The soldiers who fought for the honor and dignity of Kurumi performed exceptionally well, as all the missiles were used incredibly effectively. Suddenly, someone on the radio said that if the captain continued to help the East, he would be paid good money. Upon hearing this conversation, Meng immediately warned his friend that he should not help the East solve its problems. The protagonist, in turn, wanted to look at it from a completely different point of view. In this case, they should imagine that their team is a wolf that's been pecked by an eagle who is preparing to eat the sheep. The wolf was about to run away when he discovered that the eagle and the sheep had not come to an agreement. That's why Kurumi was curious about how his comrade acted in this case. The answer was obvious. The predatory wolf would continue to attack the defenseless sheep. Therefore, in their situation, in order to win, they need to continue the attack on the pirates. Suddenly, the country's Eastern Fleet announced that it was surrounded by pirates and asked China for help. After the successful battle, events on the ship continued to occur. Early in the morning, Meng was very sleepy and felt very tired because he had not slept enough. Looking at his comrade, the young man did not understand why he was going out to sea in the middle of the night. The thing is, one smart guy swims at night on purpose to find treasure. After taking out several treasure chests, Kurumi told her comrade that he could choose one of the chests and see who would be lucky. One of the chests contained a large quantity of gold coins, as well as incredibly precious jewelry. Central European gold coins were found in the sea, each likely worth tens of thousands of dollars, making the chest worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Because of this, Meng decided to take this particular chest and said that no one could take it away from him. But the comrade didn't care anymore because now he had coins worth tens of millions. The hero was amused by this and said that no one forced people to exchange with him, although the chests actually contained identical treasures that the guys could sell. So the sailors decided it was time to return to the island. Kurumi and her team were already in China, and the air in their country was still fresh. One of the crew members came closer and told the captain that he needed to inspect a certain ship. The vessel belonged to a research group, but it was completely unclear why it was moored to the pier. The sailors also could not contact the ship, and it was unclear whether everything was okay with the crew, but the captain said that this should not be paid attention to, and it was necessary to urgently return to the island. After a long journey, events on the island continued to happen. Having met his old friend, the major was very glad that the guy had returned and had done a good job. The young man was truly very happy to finally return to his home island. When the parents saw their son, they noticed that he had indeed lost a lot of weight during the trip. Coming closer to his mother, the young man decided to find out what kind of ship was nearby. As it turned out, it was a research vessel that arrived with Mr. Zhang. This gentleman was supposed to help solve environmental problems on the island. The slightly worried man came closer and said that they had met Kurumi before. Seeing this man, the hero immediately began to get nervous and was overcome with anger. In the end, this man deceived Sister Yi and took her money, and then he even had the audacity to come back. The worried mother did not understand what was happening, because Mr. Zhun, in her opinion, was a good person and came to help them develop. According to the mother, this man's proposals could bring them a lot of money. The young man laughed evilly and decided that he should think a little. Soon after some thought, Kurumi came to the conclusion that it was necessary to expel this scoundrel from the island. Looking at everything that was happening, the hero's parents and the major were simply shocked by this turn of events. Kurumi also decided to ask the major to immediately arrest this research vessel, as it is a long-line vessel that is stealing fish from his fishing grounds, and he suspects that there are Eastern spies inside who are spying on their seas. This statement was even more shocking, so my parents and uncle did not know how to react to it. With a heavy sigh, the young man said that he would never have taken it, and that was absolutely the truth. That's why the determined major said he would do whatever the boy asked him to do. The worried mother approached her son and asked if he really thought she had been tricked again, but Kurumi only said that it wasn't her fault. Suddenly, Gina came closer and decided to introduce herself to the protagonist's mother. The girl stated that she was Kurumi's adopted daughter. These words made the woman nervous, because her adopted daughter was the same age as her son. Two more children came up and started calling Kurumi's parents grandma and grandpa. The mother immediately felt bad, as she realized that this girl was pregnant before marriage, and her son simply went crazy. Now, the main character tried to justify himself, saying that these were children he saved in Uzbekistan. They could be considered his adopted children. The parents breathed a sigh of relief and were glad that these were not their son's children. Meanwhile, an old friend came up and said that there had been no news from Kurumi for a long time. The girl was very upset because she thought that the young man had already forgotten about her. Then the girls met eyes, and hostility immediately arose between them. After a few days, the children gradually got used to life on the island and became acquainted with the sea creatures. Children from Uzbekistan had incredible fun because they had never seen such animals before. The main character was very glad that everything was calm on his island and that the lives of his loved ones were not in danger. Suddenly, a man approached Kurumi's brother and spoke to him. This man was the director of the Department of Public Safety. He brought some documents belonging to Xiao Jing, Xiao Leg, and Xiao Anna. Thanks to this man, Kurumi is now a father, and he never would have thought that at this age he would already have children. The director of the Department of Public Security also said that the rear part of the fishing boat was found, and it was Sadozwa, whom he had met earlier. The young man realized that the people of the East were planning something evil. Besides, a warship was supposed to arrive tomorrow, and Kurumi had to accept it. At this time, the person in charge of security decided to take a little rest and assign the main character the most difficult task. After thinking for a while, Kurumi realized that a warship from another country would arrive on his island. That is why the boy decided that he would not go on this mission, because he was transporting weapons from Uzbekistan and was very guilty before this country. The next day, a military ship from another country arrived. The comrades communicated with each other, and Meng wanted to understand whether the enemy country had a chance of winning if it fought against them. The officials disembarked from the ship again, and among them was one of Kurumi's acquaintances. One of the subordinates told the guy that he needed to install a translator. The main character, using a translator, wanted to understand what all this fuss was about and asked the vice president about it. Suddenly, a helicopter began flying nearby and also landed on the island. A man who looked very much like the king emerged from the helicopter. Looking at the stranger, Meng immediately wanted to rob him, as he looked very rich. The major immediately struck the boy for such thoughts, since he was the greatest man of the Christian professions in their country. This man's name was Patriarch Keeley, and he was highly respected in all countries. Behind the patriarch stood another man, a senior naval general. Suddenly, man realized he was talking about a robbery, even though they had simultaneous translation turned on. Suddenly, the patriarch decided to point directly at Mina and wanted to tell him something. It turned out that the patriarch saw a rather unusual ring on the young man's finger. Turning to the guy, the man immediately asked to let him take a closer look at the ring. The engraving on this ring was quite unusual and surprised the patriarch. It turned out that it was the same ring that Meng had found in his chest earlier. This old man had so much money, and it seemed like he wanted to take even this ring for himself. In an instant, the old man's mood changed, and he said that this ring of the patriarch job was equal to the sacred relic of their church. The statement was truly shocking, The guys could not even imagine what exactly they had found. Job was the first patriarch of their church, the spiritual leader who led them forward. Sure, it sounded great, but Meng immediately realized that this man wanted to take the ring for himself. The patriarch, laughing, said that the boys shouldn't worry. Since the ring is in the guy's hand, it may be Job's will, and he will naturally submit to his will. Therefore, the patriarch decided to leave the ring to Manhwa so that he would continue to wear it. The good-natured man also decided to give the boys some kind of reward so that they would remain his friends forever. Now, they will become the most dear guests in their country, thanks to the unusual cross. The main character was very happy that he was given such an unusual reward. At the same time, Meng looked at this cross and wondered how long it was still standing. The elderly patriarch wished everyone good health and said that these two true warriors had saved many lives in the midst of the terrifying seas. Thanks to the will of Job, these two heroes are the masters of their world-class state. The comrades decided to discuss among themselves whether the patriarch had really come here to present them with these medals. But Kurumi believed that, no matter what, they would be able to take advantage of the advantage they had gained. Suddenly, some arrogant man came up and said that these two guys were more like chickens and they could not be heroes of the country. These words made Kurumi extremely angry, as he did not understand what kind of scoundrel dared to speak like that. Looking at the guy, the young man wanted to know what he needed to do to get this title. The arrogant guy stated that there were 147 soldiers on board, and if Kurumi defeated any of them, everyone would recognize him. There were also women and an old man on the ship who might try to attack their pets. The ship's captain exclaimed that they must bring their pets and show them to the heroes. Watching everything that was happening, the major decided to ask the boy again what he had done. Turning to his uncle, the young man explained to him that they had simply made a deal and that now the duel would take place. To the man, all this sounded like some kind of stupidity. After all, if he flogged this dispute, he would call it a friendly sparring, and if he lost, then it would be a disgrace to the armed forces of the country. With a heavy sigh, Kurumi admitted that there was no other way, since the initiator of the provocation was the captain of the ship of another country. The domestic animals in their country were incredibly cruel, and it seemed as if they were wild animals. This was probably true, since even the terrible bear was on their team. These pets even scared the guy a little, and he realized that it was true that bears can be pets. The captain of the opposing team admitted that the bravest people deserve the bravest pets. Realizing that it was still possible to win this fight, Kurumi offered the villain a bet. Addressing the major, the boy also explained to him that if he did not win, he could do whatever he wanted with him. In fact, the young man wanted to fight because he wanted to take these two children to his island. Rubbing his hands, the clever Kurumi prepared for battle. According to her opponents, Kurumi was simply showing blind confidence and stupidity in planning to fight wild animals. As they approached, one of the opposing team members said that he would give them a small head start and asked Kurumi to go first. The man couldn't even imagine how strong this seemingly puny guy could be. Suddenly, the young man realized that he had to act and hit the scoundrel with all his might. The blow was truly impressive in force, as it made the stranger cry out in pain. Thus, with just one blow, the enemy was easily defeated and lay on the floor. People were just shocked and couldn't understand how such a puny guy could do something like that. Only one young man realized that no one could defeat Shitso by pure luck. The stranger admitted that Kurumi was indeed very strong. Smiling, the boy exclaimed that he saw that his interlocutor was well informed. "I'm going to fight," said the unknown boy, who acknowledged Kurumi's strength, but was still much stronger than him. This man's name was Alexander, and his sister supported him because they believed that he would easily defeat Kurumi. This even caused the hero a little concern, since he could not even imagine that this guy was so popular. Preparing for the fight, Alexander stated that in this case they would quickly finish this fight. The fight began, and Alexander easily parried the first blow. This move even made Kurumi feel uneasy, as he didn't expect his opponent to be so agile. Two fairly strong opponents met in one battle, and at that moment it was unclear who would win. Alexander threw another punch, and Kurumi missed it because she couldn't respond. The boy fell to the floor from such a strong blow, as the blocking device did not work. The smug enemy exclaimed that the battle was over and that doctors should be sent to Kurumi as soon as possible. As he was about to leave, Alexander said that the enemy must have gone into shock after such a strong blow. But this was not true, as Kurumi was conscious and was about to continue the fight. The young man laughed and asked if his opponent would lie down next to him. Not understanding what was happening, Alexander was simply in shock, because such an outcome of the fight was impossible, because after his blow, everyone was unconscious. With an evil laugh, Kurumi said that it was now his turn to attack. After another blow, the main character easily defeated Alexander, and at that time, he was his strongest opponent. After defeating the enemy, the pets ended up in the hands of the young man, and he was very happy with such unusual animals. Using his magical abilities, Kurumi used the enlightenment technique to begin controlling his pets. One of the pets immediately began to cuddle up to the guy, and then he realized that there was now a brown bear next to him. There were a few other cute animals nearby, but it was not yet clear who they were. In fact, the captain of the enemy ship was very sorry to give up the brown bear cub, since he would not have been able to withstand life on ships. After 2 weeks, events continued to take place on the main character's ship. I turned to my team. The young man remembered that he hadn't sold fish at the market for a long time, and now he really misses it. The man decided to ask his friend how much he earned from this, but he objected that this was called not forgetting where you started and doing again what you did before. A ship began to sail nearby, with a hero and his crew on board. There were quite a lot of people on the island, and even the main character could not understand who was there. Looking at each of the people, Kurumi wanted to understand what they were doing on his island. Having landed on the island, Kurumi landed on it, and the first thing he wanted to do was find out what was going on here. It turned out that these people came to the island to buy fish, since they had no opportunity to do so in the city. In fact, Sister Ji attracted a large number of people to buy fish in bulk and showed the whole island how good their fish was. The delighted young man shouted that people had come here just in time, because today they were giving gifts. They could now catch wild blackfish. Usually their catch was about 600 kilograms, but today it was only 488 kilograms, so a limit of 2 fish per person was set. The joyful people immediately ran to buy fish. Some families had up to 7 people, and 2 fish would not have been enough. Luckily, there was still fish in the back room, and Kurumi was ready to sell absolutely the entire catch, just to please people. Suddenly, a stranger in uniform shouted from the crowd. He was very angry and decided to ask who gave them permission to sell fish here. It turned out that it was the city manager, and the hero told him that this fish market had existed for several decades. The manager started saying that he didn't allow fish to be sold here because it was cluttering the street and had a bad effect on the city. Turning around, the young man apologized to all the customers and said that in this case he would not sell the fish. The evil villain also declared that as punishment he would confiscate absolutely all the fish. Laughing, Kurumi immediately realized that the impudent man wanted to get his fish, the total value of which was now about $1 million, and it was completely unclear whether the manager would have the courage to take it. This made the disgruntled man even more angry, and he did not understand why the criminal was now resisting the confiscation of property. Taking out his phone, the young man said that he would first make one call, after which the confiscation could continue. The manager started shouting that none of those the guy called would help him. The police arrived, and the brazen men ordered them to confiscate absolutely all the things that the travelers had brought with them to the island. Starting to get angry, Kurumi asked his friend to call an ambulance so that it could arrive in time. The comrade shouted that the police needed to be called so that they could sort this matter out, but the hero insisted that an ambulance needed to be called because these impudent people would need help after he dealt with them. Unable to bear such impudence from the administration employee, the young man doused them with water. The villains began to freeze from the cold, as they were wet, and the manager began to shout, asking how they dared to pour water on them. Feeling incredible anger, the man began to shout that the young man would regret this. In fact, the guy didn't object and said that he would stand there and wait for punishment. The smart guy continued selling fish again, ordering all the customers to come closer. The arrogant man started calling Captain Yin and saying that he had business with him. Within a few hours, all the fish were completely sold out, and Kurumi wished all the customers a happy holiday. Suddenly, the manager's subordinates exclaimed that the intruders wanted to leave, causing the villains to destroy the Kurumi team's boats. When the command was given to destroy the boats, the boy immediately decided to find out how he, a civil servant, could break the law so cruelly, and whether the manager was afraid that he would leave evidence so that he would be held accountable. The crazy, impudent man didn't care at all, because he was going to control this territory and smash the cameras of journalists and people who were trying to take pictures. Smiling, the young man decided to find out if the scoundrel really had the courage to do this. Closing his eyes, the man admitted that this was indeed the case, and he would do everything to earn as much money as possible. The alarmed man saw that there were journalists there too. As it turned out, having heard that it was very hot at the market today, the reporters came for material. Some people were also angry because they were speaking out against the old law enforcement agencies. The manager was simply shocked by this turn of events, as he did not expect that people would raise weapons against him. Trying to calm the crowd, the man said they were simply arresting a suspect. The criminal also tried to claim that the gang was suspected of smuggling sea fish from areas contaminated by nuclear weapons. The scoundrel said that it was abnormal to have a fish weighing more than 200 kilograms. Some even thought that there was some meaning in this, and it was no wonder that the fish grew so big. The main character watched everything that was happening and wanted to see what the manager would do. Meanwhile, a small bus pulled up right to the market. It turned out to be the island's maritime service. Feeling awkward, the man noticed that Captain Feng Tianyang had also come here. But, as it turned out, the man did not even listen to his colleague, who insisted that the suspects needed to be arrested immediately. The leader immediately walked up to Kurumi and shook his hand, saying that he was glad to meet him at the ceremony. Watching the meeting between the director and the ordinary guy, the manager did not understand how to react to what was happening, as he was very nervous about the fact that he could be fired. The protagonist decided to explain to the captain that his subordinates were cruelly enforcing the law and misleading the public. The young man was subjected to slander and insults, and he called the police, which is why he wanted to know what the director was going to do. The disgruntled director exclaimed that these guys needed to be arrested first. According to the subordinate, this whole situation turned out to be a misunderstanding, and he nevertheless decided to admit his guilt and began to beg to be fired from his job. Kurumi breathed a sigh of relief and said that he had given the manager a chance, but he had simply blown it. Feng Tianyang told the boy that he would take this incident seriously and give a satisfactory answer regarding the incident that happened earlier. As soon as the boy said that something else would be needed to solve this problem, the man immediately became nervous. The hero burst into tears and told how Feng Tianyang's subordinates had smashed his fishing boat and insulted his reputation, and that it was difficult to be an honest fisherman these days. Even his best friend, a young man, claimed that Kurumi was the most honest fisherman. Continuing his story, the crying boy said that the other day the East sent a fishing boat to steal his fish, and the Marine Service sent Yalu and hers, but no one paid him compensation, and because of this, work became much more difficult. Coming closer to the man, Kurumi also stated that he wanted to sue and fight for his rights. Feng Tianyang became even more nervous, as he was afraid of being held responsible for such a serious offense. The ex-president decided to stop the director and asked him to wait a minute. While communicating with each other, the influential people explained to the director of the Naval Service that they should not allow Kurumi to sue them. After all, everyone understood that if the main character got his way, he would have to pay a large monetary compensation, which would become a burden for the Bureau, and secondly, if he lost the case, the Bureau's reputation would not be very good. In any case, the outcome would be bad. That is why the ex-president had one idea that they could only implement together. After talking with Kurumi, the official decided to ask the young man how he would like to receive compensation for the fishing boat from the East, since the main thing for them was that it did not produce sparks. The smart guy realized that he needed a boat, and I couldn't solve the problem, so he immediately decided to send the boat to Qianlian City. Meanwhile, the police had already arrested the corrupt manager, who was still begging to be released because he had a hungry child at home waiting to be fed. After some time, the events on the yacht continued. So, thanks to the efforts of the protagonist, the fishing boat came back, and it was worth more than 3 million yuan. He wanted to get it cheaply before, but he was given a free gift. Looking at his comrade, Meng immediately realized that he had planned everything from the beginning, and it was a well-prepared plan of action.